Chapter 11:14. At this time, it was already late at night. Several black cars sped through Xiaoni Walk's entrance and stopped in front of the garden bungalow. Mu Sheng sat in the car, leaning on his walking stick. His heart was in turmoil as he looked out of the window. 7 years ago, when Xiao Chen was born, he was ecstatic. As the head of the Mu family, it was gratifying to see the continuation of the bloodline. Now, however, he learned that that woman had given birth to 2 children for the Mu family and had secretly hidden one of them. Mu Sheng was livid. What was that woman's motive? She actually had a child. Could it be that, as Mu Wanru had said, she wanted to become a phoenix by relying on her child's status? He really doesn't know what kind of status he has. Thinking of this, he could not calm down. However, when he learned that the child was about to be returned to the family, his expression softened a little. He looked at the 2 bodyguards in black and gave them a signal with his eyes. Then he said in a low voice, "Be careful. Don't hurt the child." The bodyguards in suits alighted from the car. Just as they were about to reach the door, they heard a cold shout from the darkness. "Who is it?" Before they could recover from their shock, they saw several armed mercenaries appear out of nowhere and guard the door, not allowing them to get close. The bodyguard were stunned at first and then bellowed, "Who are you?" The mercenaries did not speak and only sized them up coldly. "Get out of the way." The mercenaries stood still and did not move an inch. The bodyguards looked at each other and decided to barge in. Just as they lifted their feet, a black shadow suddenly flashed in front of them, rushed into the crowd, and pulled out a sharp dagger from his waist. Only a few painful cries could be heard, and in just a few seconds, they fell to the ground one after another. The tendons in their arms and legs were cut. The black figure paused and slowly straightened up. He sheathed the dagger, and a cold face was exposed under the moonlight. His eyes were bloodshot and murderous. Even Mu Sheng, who was sitting in the car, could feel a biting chill in his heart. It was biting cold. This person's skills were outstanding, and his moves were fast, accurate, and ruthless. In just 5 seconds, he actually broke the tendons of the bodyguards he sent out. His fighting strength was enough to strike fear into the hearts of others. Who are these people? The old man had never seen such terrifying combat power. In the entire military region, only the special forces had such a terrifying combat level. What was going on? "Grandpa, what should we do now?" Mu Wanru asked in trepidation. It turned out that it was just as Mu Linjue had said. A group of unknown armed forces had surrounded Yun Shishir's house, preventing anyone from getting close. Mu Wanru suddenly felt a chill in her heart. Mu Sheng, on the other hand, was baffled. What were the identities of these people with such powerful skills? Mu Wanru suddenly said, "Are these people sent by Izha to protect Yun Shishir and her son?" This brat was always doing stupid things. I think his wings have hardened. He's actually bewitched by a dirty woman. Mu Sheng banged his cane on the floor in anger. Anger rose from his heart. "Grandpa, what should we do now? I think these people are very skilled. They're not simple." He snorted. "No hurry." Chapter 11:15. The Mu family's business was huge, and its influence spread far and wide. There were many Mus in the military base. In the military base, those who held the rank of SHOU commander or higher were all members of the Mu family. Not to mention, Mu Yaja's second uncle, Mu Linfeng, was the highest-ranking commander of the military base in the capital. The Mus were inextricably linked to the military base. Hence, with just a call from Mu Sheng, in less than an hour, 8 to 9 armored anti-riot vehicles were parked at the entrance of Xiaoni Walk. Once there was a special operation in the military base, even the police would have to open the way for these bigwigs. In this country, the hidden hierarchy system was still very clear. Hence, the reason why the Mus have been standing tall for so many years was because they had the absolute right to speak in the field of supreme power. Closely following behind the anti-riot vehicles was the military base's military officer, Senior Colonel Song Yi. Although he was not a member of the Mus, he was the nephew of the capital's mayor, Song Zhenghua. His wife was from a side branch of the Mus, Mu Yaja's niece, Mu Kuei. Once he heard Grandpa Mu's instructions, Song Yi gave him face and mobilized all the soldiers from the special forces. Each of them was strong and fit, and they were the country's top war machines. 8 armed, explosion-proof vehicles, carrying more than 30 regular army troops, majestically surrounded the entrance of the huge villa garden so that not even a drop of water could trickle through. These 30 soldiers were not to be underestimated. One must know that the Special Forces were the country's official military base. They were the vanguard of the military base and were responsible for special missions. Hence, each soldier was very strong. If one had to compare the Special Forces with the mercenaries, it would be difficult to see who was better. These 30-plus soldiers were equivalent to a company of soldiers. Hence, when Song Yi arrived with the 30 soldiers, the situation was completely under their control. Yun Tianyu stood in front of the window and looked at the black mass of Special Forces outside. His face turned ghastly pale. He didn't know what the purpose of these people was, nor did he know who these Special Forces soldiers were under whose orders or who sent them here. However, he knew very well that the odds were against him tonight. Yun Shishir, who was holding Yu, was also stunned by the scene outside the window. She didn't know who had sent the Special Forces outside the door, but the situation in front of her was so shocking that she was stunned and couldn't come back to her senses for a while. Mu Sheng sat in the car. Since his legs were inconvenient, he did not alight. Thus, Mu Wanru and Song Yi led their men and broke into the house. The sound of them breaking into the house alerted Yun Shishir. Alas, what kind of combat skills did the Special Forces have? They surrounded the huge villa tightly. Even if she had wings, she could forget about escaping. The Special Forces broke in first and surrounded Yun Shishir and Yu in the middle. Mu Wanru and Song Yi walked in and scanned the house. They saw Yun Shishir, who was holding Yu tightly in her arms. At first, Yun Shishir tried to resist when she saw the soldiers barging in. How could she resist these valiant state machines, though? They subdued her with one move. Chapter 11:16. Mu Wanru scanned her surroundings, and her venomous gaze landed on Yun Shishir. At this moment, she looked so down and out. Her hair was messy, and her eyes were red. She bit her lips tightly as she stared at Mu Wanru, her face full of vigilance. Mu Wanru grinned and glanced at Yu, who was in Mu Wanru's arms. Then, her smile became even more sinister and smug. Huh, Yun Shishir, look at yourself. You look so pathetic now. Mu Wanru. Yun Shishir was stunned at first. Then, there was a bone-chilling hatred in her eyes. Could it be that she had sent those soldiers from the military district? What was she trying to do? After Yun Shishir's anger subsided, a trace of fear appeared in her heart. Mu Wanru had brought so many people to the house. She must be up to no good. However, Yun Shishir could not figure out her motive. Hence, she took a few steps back cautiously and shielded Yu in her arms. She was so nervous that she could not breathe properly. You must be wondering why I'm here today, right? Mu Wanru smiled coldly. Then, her icy gaze landed on Yu, who was in her arms. I'm here today on Grandpa's orders to bring back the Mu bloodline. As she spoke, she smiled sinisterly and slowly took a few steps towards Yun Shishir. Yun Shishir, when you signed a contract with the Mu family, it was clearly written that as the contractor, you could not cause any trouble for the child's custody. But what about you? You've been hiding your son for so many years. Today, it's time for the child to return to the Mu family. Yun Shishir bit her lip hard and hugged Yu even tighter. Her eyes were fixed on Mu Wanru's every move, and she was on guard. You can't take him away. Yun Shishir said in a low voice, He's my son. You can't take him away. It was not that she did not want Yu to return to the Mu family. Instead, she was worried that if Yu returned to the Mu family, Mu Wanru would have bad intentions. She felt uneasy. You don't want to? Mu Wanru laughed sinisterly and walked in front of her. She grabbed her arm and revealed her snow-white teeth. Yun Shishir, I think you're really despicable. Back then, you were the one who signed the contract, and you were the one who confirmed the terms on it. There were no objections. Now that you're not willing to hand over the child, I can't help but suspect that you have ulterior motives. Don't tell me. She was delusional in thinking that she could rely on her son to rise in status and become a phoenix, right? I think you're really ambitious. Shut up. Do you think I'm like you? Yun Shishir retorted coldly. You're the one who's ambitious, aren't you? Mu Wanru's gaze turned sharp. You shut up. Yu is my son. I have custody of him. I'll never hand him over to you, not even if I die. Yun Shishir shielded Yu behind her. She stuck out her chest and faced Mu Wanru directly. Mu Wanru also glared at her fiercely. Their gazes collided fiercely in the air, and sparks flew everywhere. B*TCH. Mu Wanru suddenly scolded her fiercely. What? Do you think I want to bring the child back? Huh. This is Grandpa's order. You're not allowed to say anything tonight. Bring the child out. No. Yin Shishir took a step back, and Mu Wanru took a step forward. Chapter 11:17. B*TCH. Get the child out. With that, Mu Wanru reached out her hand toward Yu. Yu glared at her coldly and hid behind Yin Shishir. Yin Shishir said angrily, Mu Wanru, why should I hand my child over to you? Don't go near Yu. Keep your dirty hands away from him. What a wretch. You B*TCH. Your child will also be a wretch. You're shameless to acknowledge a thief as your mother. Yin Shishir's gaze turned frosty as she raised her hand to slap the other's face. Smack! The sound was crisp and clear. Mu Wanru was caught off guard. She was slapped so hard that her entire face was turned to one side. Mu Wanru turned around in a daze and looked at her in disbelief. You slapped me? Yin Shishir bit her lower lip hard, but her face was full of hatred. She hated Mu Wanru from the bottom of her heart. She had taken away so many things from her, and now, even Yu was going to be taken away from her. Unforgivable. You're the shameless B*TCH, aren't you? Yin Shishir could not calm herself down. She suddenly said coldly, if Yu returns to the Mu family, then he'll really acknowledge a thief as his mother. Her words were vague. The bystanders were baffled by his words, but Mu Wanru could read between the lines. His words seemed to have accurately hit her where she felt the most guilty. She bellowed, shut up. You're hiding the Mu family's child, yet you still dare to flaunt your prowess in front of me. B****. Crazy woman, you're not allowed to scold my mommy. You're the B****. Yin Tianyu was livid. He opened his arms wide and stood in front of Yin Shishir. His eyes were full of hatred and anger. His heart was filled with anger and hatred. He suddenly understood who the mastermind behind this school shooting incident was. He could see that Mu Wanru was bent on getting rid of him and his mommy. From the day he and Xiaoi Chen were assassinated that day, Mu Wanru's ambition could be seen. To this woman, he and mommy must be a thorn in her side. Not only that, when the time came, this woman would not let Mu Chen off, either. Now, he could not help but regret it. He had plenty of ways to get rid of Mu Wanru, yet he did not do it, which resulted in his mommy being in such a predicament. If he had acted earlier and gotten rid of Mu Wanru, today's incident would not have happened. Mu Wanru lowered her head and glanced at him coldly. She did not know what he was thinking at this moment. Yu's gaze on her was cold and chilling. She cursed, B****, who are you? Why do you have to talk to me? He. The one who has no right to talk to me is you. Yin Tianyu lifted his face and expressionlessly said in a hushed voice, Imposter. Yin Shishir, who was standing behind him, did not hear his words clearly. Mu Wanru, however, heard it clearly. This child had the guts to call her an imposter. Mu Wanru flew into a rage out of humiliation. She raised her hand and was about to slap Yin Tianyu's face in the next second. Yin Shishir reached out abruptly and held her hand tightly. Let go. Mu Wanru struggled with all her might. At the side, a soldier immediately stepped forward and restrained Yin Shishir. Chapter 11:18. Mu Wanru reached out to pull him away. Yin Tianyu turned his head, grabbed her wrist, and bit it with a whimper. He bit down viciously. He really bit down viciously, channeling all his anger and humiliation into his strength. He bit down as if he wanted to break her wrist. Mu Wanru struggled to shake her hand off. Letting out a shrill scream, she hurriedly tried to break free from his grip. However, Yu refused to let go of her wrist. With bloodshot eyes, he bit down harder until the tip of his teeth pierced through her flesh and he tasted blood. He had actually bitten open Mu Wanru's wrist. Ah! Mu Wanru screamed, even more wretchedly, and almost jumped up. Yin Shishir was angry and anxious. Seeing that the soldiers were about to step forward, she rushed forward to carry Yu Yu back. Yu Yu still refused to let go. Yu Yu, be good. Don't bite anymore. Her hand is dirty. Let go, be good. With Yin Shishir's words, Yu Yu obediently let go. He turned his face away and spat out a mouthful of blood. Raising his hand, he wiped the blood from the corner of his lips with his fingertips. Lowering his eyebrows, he could not help feeling nauseous. Hence, he took out a wet wipe and wiped the blood from the corner of his lips. When he looked again, he saw that Mu Wanru's wrist was bleeding profusely. She raised her hand and looked at the wound. The bite was so deep that the flesh had split open. Mu Wanru could not help cursing. What a sharp-tongued little thing. How uncultured. As she spoke, she gave the order, "Men, take this child away." Just as Mu Wanru finished speaking, a few Special Forces soldiers behind her took action. 3 Special Forces soldiers walked up to Yin Shishir. One of them held her down with one hand, while the other carried the boy in his arms. Yin Tianyu did not even have time to struggle before he was caught in her arms. Earlier, Mu Sheng had repeatedly emphasized that the children were not to be hurt. Hence, even though these people were a little rough with Yin Shishir, they were very gentle with Yu Yu. Even though Yu Yu struggled in their arms, kicking and hitting him, they were, after all, trained in the Special Forces. No matter how much trouble he made, they did not move an inch. Yin Shishir was furious. She struggled to go forward and snatch Yu back. Mu Wanru took the lead and strode forward. She pushed Yin Shishir to the ground and gave her a tight slap. Yin Shishir's hands were restrained by the soldiers, and she couldn't struggle at all. She was slapped by Mu Wanru. "Mommy." Yu Yu's heart skipped a beat when he saw this scene. He screamed at the top of his lungs as tears rolled down his cheeks uncontrollably. He then shouted angrily, "Don't bully my mommy! Don't bully my mommy! If not, I won't let you off. I won't let you off." Yu Yu struggled with all his might, but he was so weak. He was only a 7-year-old child. How much strength could he have? He was not like Xiao Yichen, who had received special training from a young age. He was so weak that no matter how he struggled, he was unable to withstand a single blow from the Special Forces soldiers. Mu Wanru cast a sidelong glance at Yu Yu and snorted. "You're overestimating yourself. You're still trying to struggle at this point." Mu Wanru was pleased with herself. She grabbed Yin Shishir's neck with such force that Yin Shishir felt suffocated. All the blood in her body rushed to the top of her head, and her face turned red. Chapter 11:19. Mu Wanru pinched Yin Shishir so hard that, in just a few seconds, she felt her consciousness fading away as if she were on the verge of suffocating. Immediately after, she heard Yu Yu's desperate scream. "Don't! Let go of my mommy! Let go! Let go of her! You're not allowed to touch my mommy. If anything happens to my mommy, I'll make sure all of you are buried with her." Yin Tianyu tried to break free several times, but just as he landed on the ground, he was pulled back with one hand. He was too weak. There was no way he could compete with the well-trained soldiers. Mu Wanru was determined to kill Yin Shishir, so she did not hesitate to use her strength. Suddenly, a shout came from the door. "Stop!" Startled, Mu Wanru subconsciously let go of her hand. Yin Shishir collapsed to the ground and coughed violently as she clutched her throat, which was about to be broken. Yin Tianyu gritted his teeth and clenched his fists tightly. His whole body trembled uncontrollably. He was in a state of extreme fear and hatred. Fear. He was worried that Mu Wanru would be ruthless and hurt his mommy. He hated that he was so weak that he could not protect his mommy. Anger. He hated Mu Wanru's ruthless methods. At this moment, his heart seemed to be swallowed by a layer of boundless darkness. A bloody thought suddenly popped up in his mind. If he had the chance, he would definitely tear Mu Wanru into pieces. Even he was taken aback by this sudden thought. However, at this moment, hatred had taken over his heart. Mu Sheng, who was standing at the door, saw this scene the moment he entered. He could not help but stop her. "Wanru, Don't blow this matter up. I'm here to take the child away. Grandpa. Mu Wanru felt inexplicably uneasy when she saw him. What made her uneasy was that she could not let him see Yin Shishir's face. Otherwise, if he recognized Yin Shishir's face, which was very similar to Mu Qingqing's, he would be suspicious. Hence, she hurried forward to support him, but purposely used her body to block Yin Shishir's view. Grandpa, why are you here? You're not in good health. It's better for you to sit in the car, he said in a low voice. I'm worried, so I came to see the child. Where's the child? Mu Wanru's face froze for a moment. She then gave a look as if ordering the soldiers to bring the child forward. However, she did not realize that the reason why she could command these soldiers previously was because of Mu's. Now that Mu Sheng was present, these soldiers would naturally listen to his orders. There was no need for them to obey whatever she said. Mu Wanru could not help but fly into a rage out of humiliation when her order was ignored. The old man ordered, "Bring the child over and let me take a look." The soldier then carried the child to the old man. Yin Tianyo's gaze was still fixed on Yin Shishir's direction. When he saw her hugging her throat and crawling on the ground in pain with a red face and a pained expression, he felt as if a knife was being twisted in his heart. His gaze landed on Yu Yu, and a trace of relief appeared on his aged face. He could not help but reach out his wrinkled hand to caress every inch of the boy's facial features before stopping at his eyebrows. Similar, they were really alike. His eyebrows and eyes were very similar to Xiao Chen's, but his nose and mouth were more like his father's. At first glance, the two children looked exactly the same. Chapter 11:20. For example, Yu Yu's eyes were bigger and narrower than Xiao Chen's. When he grew up, there was no doubt that he would be a standard, good-looking boy. Yu Yu turned around abruptly and shot him a cold look. He then raised his hand and slapped his hand away harshly. Huh! A sound was heard. He used a lot of force. The back of Mu Sheng's hand was stinging from the slap. Don't touch me, Yu Yu bellowed angrily, but his tone did not have the tenderness and timidity of a 7-year-old child. If he were a child of the same age, he would definitely be scared out of his wits in the face of such a large-scale confrontation. This child, however, was more courageous than others. His tone was very much like Mu Yaja's when he was young, wild and unruly. Mu Wanru glared at him. He's your great-grandfather. Don't be rude. Yin Tianyu did not look at her, though. Mu Wanru was even more enraged. This child's arrogance really made her angry and resentful. Mu Sheng was not angry. Instead, he laughed. Hee hee. This child is more courageous than others. He's quite like his father. Not bad. Mu Wanru could not help saying, Grandpa, don't spoil him. This child is too arrogant. We must teach him well when we get back. If not, people will think that the Mu family is lacking in education and that this child is so ill-mannered. Mu Sheng disapproved of this and looked at her reproachfully. Wanru, don't say that. I think this child is quite good. He's not like other children who are timid. Newborn calves aren't afraid of tigers. He's quite courageous. Mu Wanru opened her mouth, wanting to say something, but hesitated. What's your name? Mu Sheng was naturally elated to see the child. He could not help but ask with a smile, teasing him just like how he teased Xiao Chen. Yu Yu ignored him, though. He could not help laughing. This child has some character. Put me down, Yu Yu said coldly. Mu Wanru was about to stop them when Mu Sheng ordered, Put him down. Don't hurt the child. Hence, the man put Yu Yu down. Yu Yu struggled free from the man's grip and ran towards Yin Shishir like a madwoman. Yin Shishir had just caught her breath when Yu Yu threw herself into her arms, trembling. Mommy, mommy, mommy. The scene just now had made him tremble with fear. For a moment, he even thought that he was going to lose her. Seeing that she was safe and sound, Yu Yu still had some lingering fear and hugged Yin Shishir tightly. Mommy, the helpless and heart-wrenching cries over and over again brought back some of her consciousness. Yin Shishir subconsciously hugged him tightly. Seeing this, Mu Sheng frowned with displeasure and walked toward Yin Shishir. Mu Wanru stopped him immediately. Grandpa, don't go over. I'm afraid that she'll hurt you. Wanru, Grandpa, I'll go get the child back. With that, Mu Wanru walked toward Yin Shirshir. Yin Shirshir, I'm warning you for the last time. Don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Call the child out right now. And I'll let bygones be bygones for violating the contract. If you don't listen, don't blame me for being merciless. Yin Shirshir's throat was in so much pain that she could not make a sound. She could only hug Yu tighter. She lifted her eyes with difficulty, only to see Mu Sheng standing at the door. Her heart skipped a beat. Mu Sheng. She had seen him in a financial magazine before. Chapter 1121. She heard that he was the head of the Mu family with the highest authority. That's right, the executioner her mother spoke of. Yin Shirshir's heart wavered all of a sudden. She had always regarded the Mu family as a tiger's den. Hence, even after knowing the truth of her identity, she had never once thought of returning to the Mu family. Now, however, she wanted to acknowledge him. Acknowledge him? She had made up her mind to expose Mu Wanru's identity today. Otherwise, there would be no more chances. This way, she would be able to protect herself and Yu. As she thought of this, she gritted her teeth. Carrying Yu in her arms, she struggled to support her body and walked toward Mu Sheng. Mu Wanru's expression changed when she saw this. She was very sensitive and not stupid. When she saw Yin Shirshir walking toward Mu Sheng, she guessed at once that the latter wanted to reunite with him. No, she must not let her have her way. Mu Wanru rushed over, grabbed her clothes, and pushed her away. You're not allowed to come near. Yin Shirshir ignored her. Her eyes were fixed on Mu Sheng from beginning to end. A hoarse and broken voice escaped from her throat. Grandpa, Grandpa. She wanted to acknowledge him. She had decided to acknowledge him back to the Mu family. She did not want any identity. She only wanted to expose Mu Wanru. She wanted this imposter to disappear from her sight completely. At least, she would not hurt her again and again. Mu Wanru had pinched her too hard earlier, so her voice was broken and hoarse now. Mu Sheng squinted his eyes. He could not quite hear what she was saying. This woman's hair was messy and her clothes were tattered. Disgust flashed across his eyes. In his heart, Yin Shirshir left him the impression of a shrewd and scheming woman. In addition, Mu Wanru kept whispering in his ear to fan the flames. His impression of Yin Shirshir could not be worse. Hence, even if he could not hear clearly, he did not intend to step forward to understand the situation. Even taking a look at it would dirty his eyes. Mu Wanru was furious. She pushed Yin Shirshir to the ground. Yin Shirshir lost her balance and fell to the ground. However, in order to protect Yu, her elbow hit the ground hard. Yu's heart ached terribly. He bit his lower lip hard as bean-sized teardrops dripped onto his mother's face. They were warm and scalding. Mommy, shameless be asterisk TCH, do you really think that just because you gave birth to 2 children for the Mu family, you can fly to the branch and become a phoenix? Why don't you take a look at your lowly identity? Dream on. Mu Wanru then separated Yin Tianyu and Yin Shirshir in order to deceive others. She grabbed Yin Shirshir and gave her a beating. Yin Shirshir was not one to give in, though. She sprang up and pounced on Mu Wanru. Both of them wrestled with each other. Mu Wanru kept pulling her hair, but Yin Shirshir was not careless. She threw a punch at her and hit her chin. Mu Wanru fell to the ground in pain. Yin Shirshir threw another punch at her. He was so furious that his strength was so great that Mu Wanru lost her ability to fight back. Be asterisk starred. Seeing that Mu Wanru was being bullied, Mu Sheng could not take it anymore. He rushed forward and, almost losing all his rationality, raised the cane in his hand high at Yin Shirshir. A chilling aura broke through the wind and arrived. Yin Shirshir caught a glimpse of it from the corner of her eye. Her heart skipped a beat. She nervously held her breath and closed her eyes. Chapter 1122. Yin Shirshir opened her eyes in a daze. She could not help but widen her watery eyes as she held her breath in shock. Yin Tianyu had unknowingly pounced in front of her, his arms supporting her body as he stood still. Yu! Yin Shirshir shrieked in shock. Mu Sheng was also shocked. He hurriedly threw away his cane and carried Yu in his arms. His small face turned deathly pale without a trace of blood. Large beads of cold sweat continuously seeped out from his forehead. He closed his eyes and actually fainted from the pain. Yin Shir tried to snatch the child from his arms to check on his injuries. He pushed her away, though. "Dirty woman, don't touch him. You don't have the right to touch him." Yin Shir widened her eyes in shock. She still wanted to go forward without regard for her safety, but she was stopped by a soldier at the side. "Let's go." Worried about Yu's injuries, the old man hurriedly left with his men. Yin Shir struggled behind him, but she could not resist at all. She could only watch helplessly as Yu was taken away. Separation of flesh and blood. This was the most painful thing in the world. Thinking of how Yu had shielded her from such a heavy blow, Yin Shir's heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. She broke down and grabbed her hair, wanting to chase after him like a madwoman. Mu Wanru got up from the ground and brushed the dust off her body. She cast a sidelong glance at Yin Shir and coldly ordered, "Put this woman under house arrest." June Mo was about to have a cup of coffee and look at the script of the new program when she suddenly heard a strange movement outside the window. She walked to the window with a cup of coffee and pulled the curtains wide open. She saw several military vehicles parked outside the door. She was startled. The vehicles were parked outside Yin Shir's house. She could not help becoming more vigilant. She walked to the balcony and looked over. However, he happened to see a soldier carrying Yin Shir over his shoulder and stuffing her into the car. Yin Shir seemed to have been struck unconscious by a palm strike. June Mo's heart skipped a beat, and in her shock, the coffee cup in her hand fell to the ground and broke into pieces. The sudden movement quickly attracted the attention of the soldiers with sharp ears. The man turned around abruptly and looked sharply in June Mo's direction. But on the huge balcony, the curtains were fluttering. He was afraid that the wind was too strong and the flower pot would fall and break, so he didn't think too much about it. He got in the car and drove off. June Mo hid behind the wall, but she couldn't calm down. She glanced out of the corner of her eye. After the car had driven far away, she rushed out of the house and walked to Yin Shir's house. He saw that the gate to the courtyard was wide open. She walked in. In the living room, the lights were still on, but the floor was a mess. The broken vase, the red carved wooden cane thrown to the side, and a few drops of glaring blood. She was shocked. What happened? Was it kidnapping? Impossible. June Mo recognized at a glance that those military vehicles had June Q license plates. This wasn't a kidnapping. Though what exactly was going on? June Mo didn't have time to think and called Qinzhou first. As soon as the call connected, June Mo told Qinzhou what had happened. She had no idea what exactly had happened, but it was an undeniable fact that she had seen June Q's car take Yin Shir away. Qinzhou rushed over quickly and was shocked to see Yin Shir's house in a mess. "What happened?" he asked nervously. Chapter 1123. Qinzhou frowned and decided to give Mu Yaja a call first. However, his phone was switched off. Why was his phone switched off? Why did it have to be at such a crucial time? He heard that he was going overseas some time ago. He should have arrived by now, so why was his phone switched off? Mu residence. The door was kicked wide open by Mu Sheng. Mu Sheng anxiously carried Yu in as he hurried in. Behind him, a few private doctors from the Mu residence hurriedly followed. In her arms, Yin Tianyou's breathing quickened. His whole face was flushed red from the excruciating pain. Beads of sweat covered his entire face, and his fair little face was as gloomy as rouge jade covered in dust. Mui Chin had just finished his homework and was about to go to bed when he was awakened by anxious footsteps in the corridor. His hearing was sharp, so he would wake up at the slightest sound. The footsteps outside the door were unusually hurried. He rubbed his sleepy eyes and opened the door, only to see Mu Sheng hurrying into the room with a child in his arms. His heart skipped a beat. Although Mu Sheng was in a hurry, he did not see clearly who was in his arms. However, he saw the child's dangling hand. The bracelet on it made him realize that it was Yu. Yu. Why was Yu here? Mui Chin received a call from Mu Sheng yesterday. He would not be home for a while and would be sticking to Yin Shir. Grandpa Mu missed him very much, so he asked him to come back and visit him. Mui Chin decided to move back for a few days. He had only been away for a day, and something had happened to Yu. When he caught a glimpse of Yu Yu's pale face, Mui Chin knew that something was amiss. Hence, he chased after him and entered the room. He happened to see Mu Sheng carrying the sickly boy to the bed. Just as he opened his mouth to speak, he realized that he could not reveal the fact that he knew about Yu Yu's existence with Mu Sheng present. Hence, he walked over and tugged at the old man's sleeve nervously. Great-grandfather, who is he? Why does he look exactly like me? Shaoi Chin, this is an emergency. Go to the side first. I'll talk to you later. With that, he chased him out of the room. A few private doctors walked into the room nervously and locked the door. Mui Chin stood outside the door and paced back and forth nervously. What was going on? When he was in the room earlier, he saw Yu Yu's pale face and her haggard appearance. He had no idea what had happened, so he hurried back to the room and locked the door. He took out his phone and dialed Yun Shishir's number. The call went through, but no one answered. He bit his lip and dialed Mu Yaja's number. The phone was turned off. Damn it! Worried, he walked over to Yu Yu's room and paced back and forth uneasily. He didn't know how long he had been waiting, but it felt like a century. The door finally opened. He rushed in, only to see that Yu Yu was already awake. She was leaning against the bed with a gloomy face. Her pair of beautiful and clear eyes were buried in the shadow of her fringe, so he could not see her expression clearly. Mu Sheng was sitting at the side. The spacious room was eerily silent, and the atmosphere was so stifling that it was difficult to breathe. Mui Chin walked over cautiously. His gaze landed on Yu Yu, only to see that the latter's shoulder was bandaged tightly. Injured. Chapter 1124. Yu Yu sat on the bed with his back against the headboard and his head bowed in silence. However, when he heard movement at the door, he looked up and saw Shaoi Chin. His eyes flashed and his expression changed slightly. The two little munchkins exchanged glances, then quickly averted their gazes in tacit understanding. Mui Chin slowly walked to stand behind his grandfather. Mu Sheng sat on the edge of the bed with a deep gaze. His eyes carefully sized up Yu Yu's eyebrows, eyes, and every inch of his facial features. After 7 years, this was the first time he could seriously size up his long-lost great-grandson. His heart was filled with gratification and joy of reuniting after a long separation. But at the same time, he felt worried. This was because this great-grandson seemed to be very cold to him. Looking at his handsome and tender face, Mu Sheng could not help but reach out. Before his fingertips could touch his face, they were coldly swatted away. Don't touch me. Yu Yu's tone was as cold as ice. His eyes were like cold swords shooting at him. Her cold, distant, and even indifferent gaze hurt the old man immensely. After 7 years, they were supposed to be family, but now they were more like enemies meeting. Mu Sheng could not help but feel a stabbing pain in his heart. However, he quickly calmed his emotions. He thought to himself, the child is only 7 years old. He has always been with his mother, so it's natural for him to be unfamiliar and guarded against a sudden relative. After being separated for so many years, it's inevitable that there will be some estrangement between them. Moreover, he did not know how that woman usually educated the child. The child seemed to have a lot of hatred for him. Perhaps Yun Shishir was deliberately guiding him. In his eyes, this woman harbored evil intentions and secretly hid the Mu bloodline. She must be thinking of marrying into a rich family because of her son. She might have deliberately exaggerated the child's hatred for the Mu family. Thinking of this, Mu Sheng snorted coldly. His hatred for Yun Shishir reached its peak. Since the child had returned to the Mu family, there was still a long way to go to cultivate their relationship. There was no need to rush now. Now that he had just arrived at the Mu family, he naturally felt unfamiliar. His attitude toward him was a little more distant and cold. This was only natural. Moreover, he approved of this child. When they first met, he had a good impression of Yu Yu. It was not because of anything else, but because of his courage to protect Yun Shishir. Even though he was young, he already had the sense of responsibility that a mature man should have. Naturally, he was happy to see his children being filial. What was even more commendable was that this child didn't seem to be afraid of strangers, like a newborn calf that wasn't afraid of tigers. With this thought in mind, The gloominess on his face dissipated a little. With a smile on his face, he closed the distance between them and gently teased. "Little guy, you've got a bit of a temper. Tell me, what's your name?" Yu Yu's face remained cold as she ignored his deliberate attempt to get close to her. At the thought of his mother being put under house arrest by him, he did not know how she was doing or if she had been injured. He loathed the old man in front of him. He didn't want to acknowledge this grandpa. He hated anyone who hurt his mommy to the core. "You still want me to acknowledge you?" It was nothing more than a dream. Chapter 11:25. Yu Yu smirked. His lips curled into an arrogant smirk, and his brows arched impatiently. "Why should I tell you my name?" The old man laughed. "That's because I'm your great-grandpa, and you're my great-grandson. We're family." "Great-grandpa?" Yu Yu cocked a brow, clearly disdainful of this title. The old man did not detect the contempt in his tone, though, and patiently explained, "Great-grandpa is your father's grandfather. Little guy, you should call me great-grandpa." He. It's not impossible for me to tell you my name." Looking at him, Yu narrowed his eyes slightly. There was a hint of arrogance and disrespect on his face as he adopted a negotiating stance. His words clearly meant that he had a condition. Mu Sheng smiled. This little guy was really interesting. He was so young, but he gave off a mature vibe. He was only a 7-year-old child, but he actually gave him the illusion that the person sitting in front of him was not a 7-year-old child, but a mature and steady adult man. He asked with interest, "It seems that you want to state your conditions?" "Okay, let's hear them." He knew how to negotiate with him and state his conditions. He was so wise at such a young age. What a shrewd little guy. Yu Yu snorted and made a condition. "Let my mommy go." His words had just left his mouth when the old man's face changed, and he rejected him sternly. "No way. Why not?" Yu Yu was a little angry now. "Well, why do you have to put my mommy under house arrest?" "That's because your mommy committed an unforgivable crime," he answered with a frown. An unforgivable crime? Did this old man still think that he was the supreme ruler? He thought that he was high and mighty, yet he could casually convict others. In Yu Yu's eyes, the old man was a fatuous and incompetent tyrant. He was old and muddle-headed. Noticing his son's cold expression, Mu Sheng realized that he had overreacted. Calming himself down, he said in a low voice, "She's not your mommy. Child, you're still young. Don't be fooled by that woman. You are the blood of the Mu family. She was the one who kidnapped you and kept you by her side for so many years. She caused us to be separated from each other for so many years. How could I forgive her? She signed a contract with the Mu family. Now that she has violated the contract, I'm going to send her to see the officials." "Huh. She's my mommy, the one who gave birth to me and raised me. What you think is not important. I only know that she is my closest kin. You must let her go." Yu Yu smiled coldly and glanced at him from the corner of his eyes. His lips curled into a playful smile as he said faintly, "Grandpa, you can't be so foolish. Not being able to distinguish right from wrong, black from white." Mu Sheng was taken aback. Yu Yu suddenly said in a deep voice, "I called you old grandpa because of my daddy and also to give you some face. Still, I have my bottom line. If you cross it, I swear." His words trailed off. Yu Yu raised his eyes to look at him. The coldness in his eyes intensified to a frightening extent. He did not finish his words, though. He only swore in his heart that if anything happened to his mommy, he would not forgive him. The old man found it strange and could not help probing further. "What are you swearing?" "I swear that I'll make you regret it." Chapter 11:26. Sometimes children were more daring. It could be said that newborn calves were not afraid of tigers. However, for this child to say such words, it was a little too arrogant. No matter what, he was still his elder. Even if he was in the wrong, it was not his place to point him out. It was not that he could not make a joke about an elder as it was harmless, but his attitude should at least be more respectful. After all, he was his elder. Given their seniority, it was only appropriate for them to show a bit of the dignity of an elder. This child actually dared to threaten him. Yu Yu glanced at his gloomy face, but did not buy it. The grandfather-grandson pair looked at each other with ugly expressions. It was as if they were in a standoff. Mui Chin saw this and timely asked, "Great-grandpa, what's wrong? You look so fierce." What made you unhappy? Only then did Mu Sheng realize that Mu Yichen had entered the room unknowingly. The moment he saw him, he immediately hugged the little guy in his arms and lowered his head to say, "Come, Xiao Yichen. Look, this is your younger brother." Mu Yichen rolled his eyes inwardly. He knew that this was his younger brother. However, he still pretended that this was the first time he had seen his younger brother, who looked exactly like him. Wow, this little guy is so cute. Is he really my younger brother? Yes. Mu Sheng nodded. Because of Mu Yichen's clown antics, his expression finally eased a little. Your younger brother was abducted by a bad woman. You two brothers have been separated for 7 years. It's only natural that you two are estranged when you return home today. You should spend more time with him and talk to him. His hope was that the two little guys could develop feelings for each other easily. This way, it would be easier for Yu to get rid of the grudge in his heart. Hence, after giving a few instructions, he left Xiao Yichen in the room and left. Just as the door closed, Xiao Yichen's face sank. He walked to the door and pulled it open slightly. Only when he saw Mu Sheng's back slowly leaving with his cane did he feel at ease and lock the door from the inside. Then he walked to the window. Through the clear window, he was surprised to see a group of armed forces outside the door. He estimated that there was at least a company of people surrounding the huge Mu residence so tightly that not even a little breeze could pass through. He turned around and exchanged glances with Yu. Then he said in a deep voice, "Yu, wait for me here. I'll go to the back door and take a look." Yes. As he spoke, Mu Yichen snuck into the backyard and carefully checked the back door. The back door was also surrounded by troops. Mu Yichen's heart skipped a beat. This was a disguised form of house arrest. Mu Sheng must have deployed several troops from the army to surround the Mu residence. It seemed like he wanted to keep an eye on Yu and prevent him from escaping. Mu Yichen returned to the room and locked the door from the inside. He walked to the window and drew the curtains. Then, he walked to the bed and sat down. Yu narrowed his eyes. Seeing his gloomy face, he could roughly guess what had happened, but he still asked, "How is it?" "They're all armed forces. The entire Mu residence has been surrounded. It's airtight. The possibility of sneaking out is very slim." Yu's heart sank. The*M in it. What exactly happened? Mu Yichen held his hand worriedly. "Where's Mommy?" "Mommy is under house arrest," Yu said anxiously. Chapter 11:27. Now that his mother was in Mu Wanru's hands and her whereabouts were unknown, every second made him restless. "I should have gotten rid of this woman long ago. D*M in it. It's my negligence." Yu's heart burned with anxiety at the thought that his mother's life was in danger because of his negligence. Mu Yichen was stunned when he heard about the incident from Yu. He did not expect so many things to happen in the 2 days that he was away. Earlier, he had read about the school shooting incident from the news, but he did not expect that the so-called shooting incident was not as simple as it seemed. It was an assassination. Yu said in a low voice, "Our main goal now is to cover my escape from here." Mu Yichen furrowed his brows. "That's a little difficult. The Mu residence is now full of spies. Outside the house, there will be sentries. Mu Sheng has deployed a few troops from the army. The only place not under surveillance is this house." Yu looked up and met his gaze. He frowned anxiously. For the first time in his life, he felt so powerless and useless. Suddenly, a white light flashed across his mind. He raised his head abruptly and stared fixedly at Mu Yichen's face. He suddenly thought of something. "I've got it." Mu Yichen raised a brow. "What do you mean?" "I got an idea, but I need you to cooperate with me." "Are you sure?" Mu Yichen was worried and could not help reminding him again. "Yu, the Mu residence is full of spies now. If you take a step out of this house, you'll be captured immediately. You're like a prisoner now. You can't go anywhere." Yu gave him a meaningful smile. "Then, as long as I don't leave this house, won't I be safe?" Mu Yichen was a little stunned and mumbled, "I don't understand what you mean. It's so profound." Yu snorted. "You're too stupid." Mu Yichen pursed his lips in anger as his brows sank. Yu suddenly hooked his finger at him mysteriously. "Come here." Xiao Yichen leaned over. Yu leaned in close to his ear and told him about his plan. Mui Chin's face revealed a look of realization as he listened. Why didn't I think of this? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly frowned worriedly. But your shoulder is injured. Is it okay to do this? Yu, however, replied in a nonchalant tone, Don't worry. It's just a small injury. Right now, Mommy's safety was the most urgent matter. His small injury was nothing to worry about. Yu's plan. The mercenary group sent by the Hurricane Group would arrive in the capital tomorrow night. Before that, he had to leave the Mu residence and make other plans. Mui Chin pondered for a moment and nodded. Okay. Night fell, and the cold rain enveloped the bustling city. In an underground private warehouse in the suburbs, the streets were quiet, and only the sound of the heavy rain could be heard. In the dark underground prison, there was a strong smell of blood. The moonlight shone in through the narrow, iron window. In the dim light, a woman covered in injuries was lying quietly against the wall. His thick black hair draped messily over his shoulders, covering half of his delicate and pretty face. Chapter 1128. Her eyebrows were tightly knitted and her eyes were tightly shut. There was a line of blood at the corner of her lips, and she was clenching her teeth. Her lips were slightly twisted as if she was trying hard to endure something. Even though she was unconscious, her hands were covering her abdomen, and she maintained this strange posture. Her body was slightly curled up and her clothes were tattered. She was riddled with wounds, and there were traces of violence all over her body. The woman seemed to have fainted from the pain, as she was so stiff that she didn't move at all. The prison door was opened, and Mu Wanru led a group of burly men dressed in black as they strolled in. She stopped in her tracks and gave a signal with her eyes. A man from the side strode over. There was a hideous scar on the man's face, and it was so long that it covered half of his face. His originally ugly facial features looked even more sinister and terrifying. He strolled to the woman's side and kicked her face with the tip of his shoe. Seeing that there was no reaction, he kicked her shoulder forcefully. There was a crack, and it sounded like the sound of bones being dislocated. After a while, there was still no movement. It seemed like this woman had really fainted. He turned his head and gave a signal with his eyes. His subordinate nodded in understanding and walked over to take out a pair of handcuffs. He tied her wrists to the metal pillars and then brought over a basin of cold water mixed with salt and splashed it on her lowered head. The salt water poured down like a waterfall and corroded all the wounds on her body. In a burst of intense and piercing pain, Yin Shirshir suddenly opened her eyes and sucked in a breath of cold air with a hiss. The sudden pain caused her to raise her head high and hit her head heavily on the wall. Under the hard impact, her mind finally cleared up a little. She shook her head strenuously to get rid of the salt water that had seeped into her eyelids. Her blurry vision overlapped and gradually became clear. She saw the person standing in front of her at a glance. Before she could react, she saw Mu Wanru walking in front of her and squatting down calmly. She grabbed her wet hair and pulled, forcing her face to come closer to her. The force was so strong that it was as if she wanted to pull out a handful of her hair. Even if it was Yin Shirshir, she was also forced to wake up by the pain. Mu Wanru bared her teeth and reached out to pat her cheeks provocatively. She gave a sinister smile and said, Yin Shirshir, I didn't expect your life to be so tough. Look at you now. You're in such a sorry state. If you didn't go against me earlier, wouldn't all of this, wouldn't it? Ha ha ha. Yin Shirshir's lips curled up playfully. Lifting her heavy eyelids, the tip of her tongue slowly licked away the fishy sweetness on her lips. For a moment, she could not tell if it was her own blood or the taste of salt water. And disgusting. Instead of getting angry, Mu Wanru laughed. Her lips curled up to reveal her pearly whites as she said in a low voice, Yin Shirshir, you really are a B*TCH who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. You're already at death's door, and you're still so stubborn. I think you haven't suffered enough, right? Ha. You, as long as you're a smart person, you should know your place and kneel down to beg me for mercy. If you make me feel better, maybe I'll let you off. How about that? Do you want to beg me for mercy? Chapter 1129. Yin Shirshir's eyes were half opened lazily, but there was a cold and mocking glint in her eyes, as though she was mocking her ignorance and naivety. She didn't open her mouth, but just stared at her quietly. That gaze, which was mixed with pity, disdain, and contempt, was extremely cold, so cold that it didn't have any warmth. From top to bottom, her gaze was sizing her up bit by bit, as though she was gouging out her skin. The icy cold gaze seemed to penetrate into her bones. If she begged for mercy, would Mu Wanru let her off? Her. She must have some motive for kidnapping her here. She wanted her to beg for mercy. So before she achieved her motive, she wanted to fiercely admire her lowly attitude. Why should she seek humiliation for herself? Mu Wanru was completely angered by this cold and stern gaze as she grabbed her hair and viciously slammed her head against the hard wall. You slut who doesn't know what's good for you. Her. I like to see how hard your bones can be. Yun Shur groaned in pain as her brows were tightly knitted together. She only felt a violent shock in her head, as though her soul was about to be knocked out. A shadow flashed in front of her eyes, and immediately after, she felt something sticky slowly flowing down from her forehead and seeping into her eyes. Her vision was already scarlet red, and a burning pain assaulted her. She frowned and cursed in a low voice. Who's the one who doesn't know what's good for her? Mu Wanru, don't go overboard. Say it. What's your ulterior motive? Why don't you say it out? Before she could finish her sentence, Yin Shur suddenly felt a metallic taste in her throat, and following that, she suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing her in such a sorry state, Mu Wanru couldn't help but feel pleased. Her motive? You want to know? She suddenly leaned over and grabbed her hair viciously. Yin Shur, do you believe that I can kill you right now? Yin Shur turned her face away in disgust. She glanced at him from the corner of her eyes and coldly spat out 2 words. You want to kill me or torture me? Since I've fallen into your hands, I'll do whatever you want. Why are you spouting so much nonsense? How stubborn. Hee. If possible, I really want to kill you right now. However, it's not time yet. Haha. Mu Wanru, after pretending for so long, you finally revealed your ambition. However, you are really unbelievably naive. I'm even considering how you're going to die. Hearing her merciless ridicule, Mu Wanru flew into a rage out of humiliation and slapped her. Yin Shur turned her head around fiercely, and her face suffered a vicious slap. It stung and hurt as though it was on fire. She stared at him coldly and mocked. Mu Wanru, don't touch me with your dirty hands. I find it disgusting. Mu Wanru was flustered and exasperated. She had tied her up and brought her here and got someone to teach her a lesson. However, she had thought that when she came over, she would see Yin Shur begging for mercy. Along the way, she couldn't help but look forward to the scene of this woman kneeling in front of her, kowtowing and begging for mercy. Just thinking about it made her feel extremely pleased. However, even though she was covered in injuries, she still had a calm and tranquil expression on her face. Mu Wanru could not help but feel infuriated. Yin Shur, why don't you take a look at whose hands you've fallen into? Your mouth is still so cheap. Aren't you afraid that I'll tear your mouth apart? Chapter 1130. Yin Shur pursed her lips and sneered. But she did not use words to agitate her. However, it was impossible for her to beg for mercy. Even if she had to die a quick and painless death, she would not seek humiliation. Mu Wanru suddenly smiled sinisterly. Yin Shur, do you know how jealous I used to be of you? What right do you have to have such beautiful looks? What right do you have to gain the love of so many children without doing anything? What right do you have to have such a rich family background when we both come from humble backgrounds? Her words, however, left Yin Shur baffled. It turned out that when she first entered the orphanage, there were many boys in the orphanage who secretly liked this beautiful little girl who had just arrived. However, even though Yin Shur was an orphan with no one to rely on at that time, her temperament was innate. She was naturally elegant and had the temperament of a noble. Therefore, although many children admired her from the bottom of their hearts, they did not dare to get close to her because of their humble nature. Mu Wanru was extremely jealous. She had spent so many years in the Welfare Institute and put in so much effort to gain the trust and love of the children. What right did Yin Shirshir have to snatch away the love that should have belonged to her just because of her looks? Why did the heavens give her so much love and give her so much? How could she not be jealous? But everything I have has been snatched away by you, hasn't it? Yin Shirshir said coldly. Mu Wanru was stunned when she heard that, but she smiled. Indeed, it started from that jade pendant. Everything that originally belonged to Yin Shirshir was taken away by her. She unscrupulously enjoyed the glory and wealth that did not belong to her. She enjoyed the endless love that did not belong to her. She even snatched away the happiness that should have belonged to her. If it were not for that freak combination of factors that led to the exchange of identities, Yin Shirshir would have become Mu Yaja's fiancée, and she might have been adopted by an ordinary family and grown up in an ordinary family. However, even if he took everything away from her, so what? Mu Wanru originally thought that once she became Mu Yaja's fiancée, happiness would be within her reach. But what did she get in return? It was exploitation. He had been ruthlessly used as a chess piece. In order to make use of her, Mu Yaja had even taken away her rights as a mother. Only now did she realize that her so-called happiness was nothing more than an illusion. Mu Yaja had actually deceived her into losing her qualifications to be a mother. Infertility? How laughable was this lie? She had actually believed him and had even felt guilty towards him all this while. She even thought that it was all her fault that she couldn't give birth to a child for the Mu family. However, in the end, she was completely played in the palm of his hand. She loved him so much, but he ruthlessly used her and betrayed her. How stupid was she to trust the man she loved deeply without hesitation and treat him like a treasure? In the end, not to mention happiness, even that engagement was just a pretense. What about Yin Shirshir? What right did she have to receive Mu Yaja's love? What right did she have to have so much, to have everything that made her jealous? Mu Wanru stared at her with a deadly stare, as if there was a raging fire of jealousy burning in her chest. Yin Shirshir, to be honest, I used to be so jealous of you. Haha, since Mu Yaja loves you so much, I'd like to see how far he can go for you. Chapter 1131. Mu Wanru's lips curled into a sinister and bloodthirsty smile. Take a guess. Since you're so important to him, do you think he'll give up the Mu family's inheritance for you? Yin Shirshir was stunned. She suddenly realized that Mu Wanru intended to use her to blackmail Mu Yaja into giving up his right to inherit the Mu family. Mu Wanru, you're so despicable. Still, how important do you think I am to Mu Yaja? He won't give up his right to inherit the Mu family for me. I think you should give up. Yin Shirshir said coldly. Mu Wanru cocked a brow and gave him a sinister smile. You alone may not be that important, but what about adding Yin Tianyu to the mix? Yin Shirshir's face drained of blood and turned ghastly pale the moment she said that. What do you want? What do I want? Mu Wanru grabbed her face and said fiercely, I want Mu Yaja to give up his right to inherit the Mu family. You, Mu Wanru, you're despicable. Yin Shirshir gritted her teeth. I'm warning you. You're not allowed to lay a finger on you, or else. Or else. What do you do to me? Mu Wanru interrupted her coldly and taunted. Yin Shirshir, you can't even protect yourself now. I advise you not to put up any unnecessary struggle. Yin Shirshir's gaze was as cold as a blade. At this moment, she wished that her gaze could kill. That way, she could cut this woman into pieces. You don't have to glare at me like that, Yin Shirshir. You're so pitiful. Do you think that you're so arrogant just because Mu Yaja dotes on you? What are you without him, though? You're just a pitiful worm. Now, you're just struggling on your deathbed. Yin Shirshir said coldly. Mu Wanru, I advise you not to play with fire. Huh? Yin Shirshir, you should know your place. Right now, if you please me, I will be kind and torture you less before you die. Don't be stubborn. You'll be the one suffering a fate worse than death when the time comes. As Mu Wanru spoke, she stretched out her leg and kicked her face. Yin Shirshir abruptly turned her face away and clenched her teeth so hard that they almost broke. Humiliation welled up in his heart. For the first time in his life, he hated himself for being so useless. She finally saw through Mu Wanru's motive. She was planning to use her and Yu to threaten Mu Yaja to give up his authority over the Mu family. Then, she would kill them both. This woman's heart was so vicious and her methods were so despicable. Yin Shishir's eyes were bloodshot as she stared at her hatefully. Mu Wanru enjoyed her angry face and couldn't help but smile as she said casually, "Yin Shishir, you really don't intend to kowtow to me and beg for mercy? Now I'm giving you this chance. If you kowtow to me and beg for mercy, perhaps I'll be kind and give you a quick death. Before you die, I won't torture you so much." Yin Shishir, too, sat up and leaned against the wall with much effort. Even though her hands were handcuffed to the iron pillar and her body was already battered and exhausted. Her whole body was dripping with blood and her face was covered with blood. Her wet hair was messy. However, some people were born with an elegant temperament. Even though she had fallen into hell and was in a mess, it didn't affect her elegant temperament. Chapter 1132. Yin Shishir replied coldly, "You've already hung my arms up. How am I supposed to kowtow to you and beg for mercy? At the very least, you should release me." Mu Wanru's eyes narrowed. "You're trying to escape?" Mu Wanru went into deep thought for a moment and swept a glance over. The man standing beside her immediately stepped forward and unlocked her handcuffs. "You're not allowed to play any tricks." Yin Shishir's hands were released from the metal pillar and immediately handcuffed. She rubbed her wrists in pain and raised her eyes coldly, only to see Mu Wanru standing arrogantly in front of her with a complacent look on her face. "Let's begin." Mu Wanru couldn't wait to see her lower her head and beg for mercy. Yin Shishir slowly took a few steps toward her. All of a sudden, she grabbed her by the collar and pushed her to the ground. Sitting on her body, Yin Shishir wrapped the handcuffs around her neck and strangled her fiercely. Mu Wanru had not expected that Yin Shishir would still dare to do such a thing under such circumstances. She couldn't react in time and was almost suffocated by the handcuffs. She struggled painfully as her legs kicked wildly, and even her high heels were sent flying. A few men by the side immediately stepped forward to stop her, but Yin Shishir seemed to have turned ruthless. Even though her hair was being held tightly, she didn't release her grip. The handcuffs were locked tightly around Mu Wanru's neck, and she used a lot of strength, and very soon, a deep blood mark was formed. Yin Shishir lowered her head and stuck close to Mu Wanru's face as she looked into her eyes. The hatred in her eyes was obvious. "Mu Wanru, since you're bent on killing me, then why don't you accompany me in death? How about that?" You let go. Because of the excessive suffocation, Mu Wanru's consciousness was in a mess, and she couldn't even utter a coherent sentence as she kept struggling. She saw despair and hatred in Yin Shishir's eyes. Crazy. This woman is crazy. However, Yin Shishir knew that she was very clear-headed. She was not afraid of any threats. Death. However, she could not watch this woman hurt Yu. Yin Shishir suddenly pulled the iron chain and tightened it around Mu Wanru's neck. Mu Wanru's face was flushed red, and the veins on her forehead were bulging. She was on the verge of suffocating. She turned her head with a ferocious expression and struggled with her hands. The man beside her picked up a chair and smashed it on Yin Shishir's back. Bang! A sound was heard. One of the legs of the chair was broken. Wood chips flew everywhere. Dust flew in the dimly lit basement. Yin Shishir's body stiffened and she fainted. Mu Wanru was helped up by someone. She covered her throat and coughed violently. Her vision was blurry and her whole body was spinning. F*CK, B*TC. She walked to Yin Shishir's side and stretched out her leg to kick her. However, when she lifted her leg, her whole body was in a mess. She kicked empty air and her body went limp as she fell to the ground. Mu Wanru cursed as she stood up from the ground. She picked up a wooden stick from the side and was about to teach her a lesson. However, her phone rang at the wrong time. Mu Wanru panted for a while and threw the wooden stick aside. She looked at the phone screen and saw that it was a call from Mu Shang. She immediately calmed her rapid breathing and picked up the call. "Grandpa." Wanru, where did you go? Oh, Grandpa, don't worry. I'll be back soon. Where's that woman? Chapter 1133. There was a momentary panic in Mu Wanru's voice, but she quickly regained her composure. I've already put her under house arrest. Don't touch her for now. I have something to ask her when we have time, he said in a low voice. Mu Wanru sneered inwardly. I'm afraid there's no chance for that. Still, she said, Okay, Grandpa. I'll be right back. Where's that child? That child was very distant to me and was very cold to me. I've asked Xiao Yiqin to accompany him. Hopefully, it can open his heart. His tone was indescribably sad and dejected. Mu Wanru smiled and comforted him at once. Grandpa, don't be anxious. He's still young. Coming to an unfamiliar environment, he definitely needs time to adapt and get used to it. Besides, you've been separated from him for 7 years. You're still a stranger to him. He needs time to get to know each other. As time passes, feelings will develop. I hope so, he sighed. It's getting late. You should hurry back. Mu Wanru hung up the phone and instructed her subordinates. You guys, keep an eye on her. Do you understand? They nodded in agreement. Mu Wanru then left. The door to the warehouse slowly closed. The men looked at each other before turning around and hanging Yun Shirshir by her hands on a pillar. One of the men could not help taking a few more glances at her. This last is quite pretty. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but reach out and pinch her soft waist, the corners of his mouth curling into an extremely lewd smile. Another man hid his hand from the side. Don't move. What do you mean by this? This woman is so pretty. Can't we touch her? Didn't you hear what Miss Mu said? Keep an eye on her and don't think about anything else. The man refused to give up and encouraged. Anyway, this woman will die in the end. Why don't we have some fun while she's still alive? Look at this woman. She's quite pretty. It's such a pity to let her die like this. Be careful not to kill someone. The man on the side shouted. Wouldn't it be fine to be more careful? Big brother, why don't you go first? Anyway, as the underling, it's his turn to play last. This man obviously coveted Yun Shirshir. It would be a pity for such a beauty to die like this. Why not take advantage of the fact that she's dying to give these brothers some pleasure? Come on, don't try anything funny. The higher-ups had ordered for this woman to be kept alive. Take it easy. Tonight, we'll take turns to keep watch. Don't mess around and ruin things. This man had spoken, as if his words had some authority. Even though the few lackeys on the side were itching unbearably, they had no choice but to listen obediently and give up. However, she was still thinking about it in her heart. When Mu Wanru returned to the Mu residence, the living room was brightly lit. She gave Mu Yinjue a call before returning to the Mu residence. According to his instructions, Mu Wanru had already placed Yun Shirshir under house arrest in an extremely remote place. Mu Yinjue was naturally very satisfied with the plan going smoothly. Over the phone, he told her that Mu Yaja was not in the country and that they had 2 days. They had to move Yin Tianyu out of the Mu residence before tomorrow night. Chapter 1134. Now that Yun Tianyu was trapped in the Mu residence, it was the best opportunity to strike. However, there was not much time left. After night, he had to take Yun Tianyu away early the next morning. When he arrived at the room, he saw Xiao Yiqin standing in front of the window with his hands in his pockets. He was sizing up the armed forces outside the Mu residence with a gloomy face. Yun Tianyu, on the other hand, was lying on his side on the bed. Mu Yiqin warily turned around when he heard the commotion. When he saw that it was his grandfather, a sweet smile bloomed on his face. Great-grandpa, The old man smiled and nodded. He then looked at Yun Tianyu, who was lying on the bed, only to see his drooping eyelids and unconcealable fatigue. Is he asleep? Mu Yiqin smiled. Little brother seems to be tired, so he's asleep. The old man pondered for a moment before asking, How is it? Mu Yiqin walked to the bedside and slowly sat on his side. He gently placed his hand on the back of Yu Yu's hand and frowned helplessly. Little brother is a little cold to me. He seems to be a little afraid of strangers. Still, he's just returned home, so everything is unfamiliar to him. We won't be so distant after we get to know each other for a while. The old man was stunned. For some reason, Mui-chin gave him a very unfamiliar aura. Although the person standing in front of him was indeed Mui-chin, the aura he exuded was inexplicably mature and steady. He was not as naive as he used to be. Instead, he was calm and wise. He originally thought that Yun Tianyo's arrival would cause Mui-chin to be disgusted and ostracized. Unexpectedly, as an elder brother, Mui-chin was tolerant of his little brother's arrival. This was beyond his expectations. He could not help asking, "I-chin, what do you think of this little brother of yours?" "I like him very much." Mui-chin raised a brow, his eyes shining. "Great-grandpa, I'm very happy to have such an adorable little brother. From now on, I'll be an elder brother. I'll take responsibility as an elder brother and take good care of him." "Oh, I-chin is such a good boy." Mu Sheng hugged his shoulders. However, from an angle that he couldn't see, Mui-chin's eyes flashed with indifference and disgust. Raising his head, he said, "Great-grandpa, I'll go back to my room to rest. I still have to go to the kindergarten tomorrow." "Yes, rest early. I'll accompany this child." "Great-grandfather, aren't you going to sleep?" Mui-chin tilted his head, looking very innocent. The concern in her words greatly pleased the old man. "I want to spend more time with him. I-chin, be good. Go back to your room and sleep." "Yes." Mui-chin left the room. The moment he closed the door, his eyes turned cold. He slowly picked up his pockets, but suddenly realized that he didn't seem to know where Mui-chin's room was. Looking around, Mui-chin slowly narrowed his eyes. That's right. Right now, Xiao-I-chin was lying on the bed in Yu Yu's clothes and had fallen asleep. At this moment, Mui-chin, who had left the room, was Yu Yu, who had changed into Xiao-I-chin's clothes. He looked at the long corridor outside the door. The Mu residence was ridiculously huge. He suddenly walked to the staircase and ordered the servant downstairs. "My room is in a mess. Help me tidy it up." "Yes, young master." With that, the servant went up to the second floor. Yu Yu followed him into Mui-chin's room, only to hear the servant's strange voice. "Young master, your room is not in a mess." Chapter 1135. There was a light fragrance in Mui-chin's room. Yu Yu surveyed his surroundings and slowly walked to the window. He carefully pulled open the curtains and peered outside. He could still vaguely see the patrolling soldiers stationed at the entrance. This old Master Mu had really made use of his speed to the extreme. She did not know when he had deployed another wave of troops to surround the huge Mu residence so tightly that it was airtight. He was not planning to let even a fly in. He closed the curtains tightly, walked to the bathroom, locked the door, took out his phone, and dialed Lee Hanlon's number. As he did not have his phone with him, he could only use Mui-chin's phone. The call was quickly connected. On the other end, Lee Hanlon was especially alert. The moment he picked up the call, he asked tentatively, "Is this Director Yin?" "It's me." Yu Yu's voice was gloomy. "Director Yin, what exactly happened?" Lee Hanlon's tone was urgent and nervous. Clearly, he did not know what had happened. The mercenaries sent to guard the villa had suffered heavy casualties. It was said that they had been encircled by the armed forces on a large scale. Of the dozen or so mercenaries, only 2 survived, and they were seriously injured. What did it mean to be on a large scale? A whole company of armed forces. What exactly happened that required the deployment of such a large number of armed forces? Lee Hanlon was very anxious when he could not get through to Yun Tianyo's phone. Yun Tianyu patiently recounted what had happened and informed him of his current state of being imprisoned by the Mu family. The Mu residence is currently surrounded by armed forces. According to my estimation, there are 300 to 400 people. 300 to 400 people? Lee Hanlon cursed inwardly. So many people. What exactly was Mu Shang planning to do? They're probably afraid that I'll be taken away. Things aren't that simple, though. It's dangerous for me to stay here any longer, Lee Hanlon immediately said. Then, we'll bring the troops over tomorrow. Hurricane's mercenary team should arrive in the capital tomorrow. Once they were in place, he would immediately rush to the Mu residence. Yun Tianyu, however, said in a low voice, "There's no need to mobilize so many people. Wait for me at the entrance of Alan Bell's kindergarten at 8:30 a.m. tomorrow." He then roughly explained his plan to Lee Hanlon. The boy's plan was simple. With the stealing the sky and swapping the sun, he pretended to be Mu Yi-Chen and switched identities. The next morning, Mu Yi-Chen would be sent to kindergarten by the Mu family's driver. He arranged for Lee Hanlon to meet him at the school gate at 8:30. Lee Hanlon was stunned. He could not help but marvel at Yu Yu's quick-wittedness. To be able to think of this so calmly at such a critical juncture was truly not simple. Agent Lee, bring your men and arrive on time tomorrow. Don't make too much noise to avoid arousing suspicion, but we have to match everyone with weapons. Yes, I'll send you my GPS location. If anything happens, I'll send a signal in time. All right, I understand. Listen to my arrangements for the rest. Yin Tianyu hung up the call and raised his wrist to activate the GPS function of his smartwatch. He then sent a satellite location to Lee Hanlon's phone. After securing it, he walked to the desk and opened the drawer. There was a notebook inside. Chapter 1136. He keyed in a series of commands, but the system displayed the location of Shawnee Walk. Yin Tianyu furrowed his brows. According to Mu Sheng, he had placed his mommy under house arrest. Where exactly was she being held now? Previously, he had installed a GPS system in his mommy's phone and implanted a GPS chip in her watch. However, through the GPS system, one showed that she was at Shawnee Walk, while the other showed that she was at 28 Yushu Street, Fuyang Road. Yun Tianyu's heart skipped a beat as anxiety and panic appeared on his usually calm face. He bit his lower lip hard as his eyes flickered. Soon, he closed his eyes and took a deep breath to force himself to calm down. It was at this point that he needed to remain calm. Otherwise, he would only be flustered. Yu Yu's gaze fell on the screen again. He opened the system interface and hacked into the surveillance network of Shawnee Walk. The surveillance network of Shawnee Walk had extensive coverage. In the first image, a soldier carried an unconscious woman into a car. Yu Yu recognized the unconscious woman as Yun Shirshir through her clothes. He paused the image and locked onto the car plate number. He hacked into the traffic network surveillance system and keyed in the plate number. Instantly, countless moving images of vehicles popped up on the screen. He played the videos one by one. However, the surveillance footage showed the vehicle driving north along Fuyang Road, crossing the 321, a national highway, and the Hujiang Bridge before reaching the entrance of the Mu residence without any hindrance. When the car stopped, Yu paused the video, but he did not see Yin Shirshir. Strange. He clearly saw his mommy get into this car. Why was she missing? Did she vanish into thin air? Impossible. He replayed the video again and carefully studied every detail in the surveillance footage. When he saw the military vehicle stop at Fuyang Road, it suddenly stopped at the corner of the street and stopped moving. He could only see a corner of the car's front when it stopped. Coincidentally, the car stopped at the blind spot of the surveillance camera, so he could not see what happened when the car stopped. The car stopped for about 5 minutes before continuing on its way to the Mu residence. Yu narrowed his eyes slightly. The car stopped at Fuyang Road for 5 minutes. The last location on his mommy's watch also showed that she was at Fuyang Road and Yushu Street. Linking these two pieces of suspicious information together, Yu quickly caught a hint of what was going on. They had been secretly transferred away. He continued to zoom in on the video, and through the surveillance footage from other locations, he quickly locked onto a Mercedes-Benz sedan. After obtaining the car's license plate number, he keyed in the license plate number. However, the information that popped up was a blank. Yin Tianyu's expression changed, but his heart turned cold at once. It seemed that this car had a fake license plate, and the license plate was invalid. The city's transportation network system required real and valid license plate numbers to obtain information about the vehicle's movements. Without a valid license plate number, trying to lock onto the car's every direction in the huge traffic system of Beijing was undoubtedly like looking for a needle in a haystack. There was simply no possibility of accurately locating the car. Chapter 1137. However, as it was at night, the clarity of the surveillance footage was limited. Moreover, the traffic was like water. At night, the cars moved at high speed, and this Mercedes-Benz was a more common brand, so it was easy to blur the target. The only clue he had was like a stone sinking into the sea. A wave of despair washed over him. Yun Tianyu clenched his fists tightly as his face turned ghastly pale. Once again, he resented himself for not taking action in time and giving the enemy an opportunity. He stood up abruptly and walked to the window. His fierce gaze swept across the soldiers surrounding the entrance. He swore that if anything happened to his mother, he would do everything in his power to raze the entire Mu group to the ground overnight. Just as he was at his wit's end, he suddenly thought of something. A white light flashed across his mind. He suddenly recalled something. He returned to the computer and entered a series of commands. Through the GPS, he located Mu Wanru's car. It was a military 9918X Audi. The GPS showed that the Audi had been parked at the intersection of Fuyang Road and Yushu Street for 2 minutes. Soon it drove away. This was a crucial clue. He was suspicious. Mu Wanru had obviously moved the person behind Mu Shang's back. As for where she had been moved to, it was impossible to track her. At least, he was clear of one thing. Mu Wanru was one of the masterminds behind this. Perhaps she was the one who had secretly moved the person to another place. Perhaps there would be other clues and rewards if he started from her. Royal Morocco Hotel. As there was an 8-hour time difference between Morocco and China, it was now 11 a.m. Mu Yaja had just arrived in Morocco when, under Mu Linfeng's arrangement, he attended a royal banquet. After the banquet ended, he returned to the hotel to rest. When he woke up, he realized that his phone was out of battery. He immediately ordered someone to charge it. When Mu Yaja went downstairs, Mu Linfeng was already sitting in the dining room. Upon seeing him, Mu Yaja respectfully greeted, "Second uncle, you're awake." Mu Linfeng sat elegantly at the dining table and flipped through the newspaper with a solemn expression. Mu Linfeng was Mu Yaja's second uncle and the other person in charge of the Mu family. His status was prominent and his methods were similar. It could be said that the reason why Mu Yaja was able to smoothly obtain the power of the Mu family was because of him behind the scenes. It was not to be underestimated. Thus, it was clear that Mu Linfeng's position in the Mu family was particularly prominent. It was not because of anything else, but because he held a frightening amount of power in his hands. When a family developed to a certain scale, it was no longer a simple business family. The reason why Dishing Financial Group was able to control more than half of the country's business lifelines was not only due to Mu Yaja's ruthless methods and extraordinary capabilities, but also due to the Mu family's supreme centralization of power. It could be said that Mu Linfeng's status was on par with Mu Yaja's. It was just that, due to his identity, he could not be completely exposed to the public. Thus, very few people knew of his name. Mu Yaja sat down at the dining table. Just as he sat down, Mu Linfeng spoke first. "I heard that the banquet yesterday went very smoothly." Chapter 1138. Mu Linfeng discreetly studied Mu Yaja's expression, which was as calm as usual. Inwardly, however, he was a little displeased. "I heard that you danced with Princess Charlotte at the banquet last night. You did well." Mu Yaja's tone remained indifferent. Lowering his head, Mu Linfeng set the newspaper aside and wiped his hands with a wet towel. "This morning, Dukansbach of Morocco's imperial family hinted to me that Princess Charlotte has feelings for you. Princess Charlotte is the beloved daughter of Morocco's eldest princess, Caitlin. She has an outstanding appearance and a net worth of $2 billion. She's now the second in line to the throne. Arrange a time for you to meet her later. Try to get to know each other better." Mu Yaja's gaze froze. He abruptly looked up, his gaze cold. He suddenly understood why second uncle had specially summoned him to leave the country. He was trying to use his brain again. Mu Yaja was very displeased with Mu Linfeng's decision to arrange a relationship with the imperial family's princess on his own accord. However, given Mu Linfeng's seniority, he could not expose him openly. He merely said expressionlessly, "There's no need for a meeting, is there? I'll be returning home after tonight. I still have matters to attend to at the company." His cold refusal didn't surprise Mu Linfeng, but this response made him extremely displeased. You have matters to attend to at the company? Mu Linfeng was very displeased with his answer. He snorted and said casually, I think you're the one who's thinking about that woman. Although he did not say it out loud, Mu Yaja was well aware of who he was referring to by that woman. A dangerous glint flashed across his eyes as he narrowed them. Even though the person sitting in front of him was second uncle of the Mu family, there was still a hint of displeasure in his tone. You've investigated her? I've investigated everyone around you. Mu Linfeng did not beat around the bush and went straight to the point. Mu Yaja's expression changed. His eyes turned slightly cold, but it only lasted for a fleeting moment before disappearing from his sight. Still, deep down, he still felt uncomfortable with Mu Linfeng's action. All of a sudden, Mu Linfeng lifted his head and knocked on the table with his fingertips. His tone revealed his dissatisfaction with Mu Yaja. Yaja, you know that I've always thought highly of you. Among all the people in the Mu family, second uncle values you the most. I've done my best to help you become the head of the Mu family. After all, no matter if it was your ability or talent, second uncle believed in you. Only when Mu Group was handed over to you can we expand our territory even more. It's not like you don't know second uncle's ambitions. Your ambition is something that second uncle can see clearly. However, second uncle warned you earlier that no matter what you do, you have to use your brain to think before you do anything. It's not that I forbid you from having women. Men are hot-blooded. You're in the prime of your life, so you should have a few women by your side. You can have a woman, but not Yin Sure. At the end of his words, Mu Linfeng emphasized the word not. His resolute attitude was not to be questioned. Chapter 1139. Second uncle, what do you mean by this? Although Mu Yaja knew what his uncle meant, he still wanted to clarify things. Yaja, I won't hide anything from you. In ancient times, Yin Sure is a demoness who seduces the emperor's heart. She's a femme fatale. If you keep her by your side, she'll only become a hindrance to your ambition and a stumbling block. In ancient times, how many emperors lost their empire because of a momentary lust? I don't wish for such a thing to happen to you. So, you have to break up with this woman immediately. You're not allowed to interact with her anymore before you're bewitched by her. No, Mu Yaja vetoed without hesitation. In his eyes, he had always been very clear about his woman and his career. He would not allow anyone to give him a hint. Even if this person was his second uncle, whom he respected the most, he would not allow it. Because he was very clear about this, he did not wish for anyone to interfere in this matter. Mu Linfeng's eyes flashed with shock and anger. Haha, Yaja, this is the first time you've defied my authority, and it's actually because of a woman. I'm a little disappointed. Mu Yaja's lips curled into a cold smirk. He had no intention of giving Mu Linfeng face. Although his tone was still respectful, the determination in his words could not be ignored. Second uncle, I've always treated your orders like an imperial edict. It's just that there's no room for negotiation in this matter. As for my woman, it's my private matter. I hope you won't interfere in this matter. Mu Linfeng's face turned cold in an instant. Mu Yaja did not seem to be afraid of his cold, knife-like glare. He raised his eyes and met his gaze. His eyes were as calm as still water. After a silent confrontation, Mu Linfeng snorted. Mu Linfeng snorted coldly, his tone revealing a hint of danger. Why don't you take a good look at your current status? You're not young anymore, and you've already come this far. I won't let you mess around no matter what. After a pause, he continued. Actually, if it were in the past, I wouldn't have objected to you finding a woman. Furthermore, I know your character very well. You would never break the rules because of a woman. However, the things you've done during this period of time are indeed a bit too much. It's not that second uncle wants to criticize you, but what you've done has truly disappointed second uncle. He was referring to the fact that some time ago, because of Yin Sure, he had even exchanged fire with the Song family. Jiang Qimeng was especially dissatisfied with this. Even though Song Zhenghua didn't say it out loud, he put into action. As for the development of several plots of land, they had not given their approval for a long time. This caused Yi Sheng to suffer a great loss. Of course, Mu Linfeng didn't care about such a small loss. However, in his eyes, Mu Yaja's actions were already out of line. For a long time, the Mu family's territory had been greatly expanded due to the support of various parties. Because of such a trivial matter, Mu Yaja did not hesitate to offend the Mu Jia. Mu Linfeng was naturally displeased. It was not that he had not warned Mu Yaja, but Mu Yaja did not seem to take it to heart at all. This time, he had summoned him to Morocco in hopes that he could cultivate a relationship with Princess Charlotte. Chapter 1140. If the Mu family could form a marriage alliance with the Morocco royal family, the benefits it would bring to the Mu family would be unprecedented. However, this fellow did not seem to care about this matter at all. Mu Linfeng's dissatisfaction with him had reached its limit. This woman is very dangerous. She has no background and no power. She'll only be a burden and a stumbling block if she stays by your side. She won't benefit you at all. Mu Linfeng's words were not without reason. He was worried that if his nephew cared too much about this woman, she would definitely become his Achilles heel. Once a person had an Achilles heel, things would be different. In the past, Mu Yaja was swift and decisive in his actions. His methods were hard and ruthless, and he only cared about benefits and not feelings. This was also why he could become a strong candidate for the position of the Mu family's head. If he had another Achilles heel, it would undoubtedly be fatal. Mu Yaja remained silent and did not say a word. Mu Linfeng spoke again, guiding him patiently. I have to give you a piece of advice. As the saying goes, it's lonely at the top. Many people are coveting your position now. If you make one wrong move, you might lose everything. Since this woman's existence will endanger you, I can't let this matter rest. I can't ignore it. Don't be foolish because you're obsessed with her. If you fall from such a high place, you'll be smashed to pieces. Mu Linfeng's tone was very heavy, but each word was like a gem. In just a few words, he had brought up the severity of the matter. Mu Yaja was momentarily speechless. Mu Linfeng was speaking from the perspective of his own interests. Every word and sentence had his own considerations. After all, it was just as the saying went, it's lonely at the top. The more one stood at the top, the more one could not have any Achilles heel, lest others take advantage of them. Mu Linfeng's words were very pertinent, but Mu Yaja did not dare to agree. However, in this situation, he had to leave some face for this senior of high status. Therefore, after a while, he said in a deep voice, "Second uncle, I know what I'm doing and what I'm doing." Mu Yaja's words were like a boulder that had been hanging in Mu Linfeng's heart. He laughed a few times and then said with satisfaction, "Hee, if you can say that, it means that you won't disappoint second uncle. Yaja, I have high hopes for you. Don't let second uncle down." Mu Yaja had just put down the newspaper when the servant rushed downstairs with his phone. "Chairman Mu, you have a missed call." The servant respectfully handed the phone to him. Mu Yaja unlocked the screen and saw that there were more than 10 missed calls. 3 of them were from Xiaoqian. His expression couldn't help but become alert. It was not because of anything else, but the fact that little Chen rarely called her, unless it was something important. Just as he was about to call back, he suddenly remembered the time difference in the country. It was still the middle of the night. It was probably time for the little fellow to sleep. Therefore, he did not call back immediately. Just as he put down the phone, it suddenly rang. Mu Yaja frowned and picked up the call. On the other end was Qin Zhou's anxious voice. "Chairman Mu, Sure is missing." "What?" He stood up abruptly, only to realize that he was too agitated and attracted Mu Linfeng's attention. Chapter 1141. It said that someone from the military came and kidnapped her last night. As for her whereabouts, there's still no news. "Chairman Mu, where are you? Is it convenient for you to return?" Qin Zhou, who had always been calm, could not hide the anxiety in his voice. Mu Yaja's brows furrowed. Military? Mu Yaja's first suspicion was Mu Linfeng. However, on second thought, it was impossible. Mu Linfeng would not do such a thing. From a certain point of view, this second uncle respected him a lot. Even if he did not want any hidden dangers around him, he would not kidnap his woman without a word. "Have you sent someone to look for her?" "I have, but we haven't been able to find her." "Wait for me." Mu Yaja put down his phone and took his coat from the hanger. He ordered, Arrange a flight. I'll return immediately. What do you intend to do now that you're back? Mu Linfeng suddenly raised his head with suspicion in his eyes. Why are you in such a hurry? Did something happen? It's something important. Oomph. Don't tell me it has something to do with that woman? Mu Linfeng asked suspiciously. Mu Yaja remained silent for a while, but he did not say anything. However, the moment Mu Linfeng glanced at him, he knew that his rush back had something to do with Yun Shih. Hence, he said coldly, "You're not allowed to go back. There's an important banquet tomorrow, and you must attend it." Second uncle, I'm sorry. I'm afraid I can't attend the banquet. Sorry, Mu Yaja said as he walked to the door. Stop right there. Mu Linfeng was livid as he slammed the table and stood up. Mu Yaja stopped in his tracks, but he did not turn around. However, his back stiffened. Mu Linfeng stood up abruptly and left the table. He walked behind him with a cold expression. Yaja, this isn't like you. What do you want to do now that you're back? Second uncle, I'll give you a satisfactory explanation later, but I have to go back now. With that, Mu Yaja left in a hurry. Mu Linfeng stared fixedly at his back view. His eyes slowly narrowed as a dangerous glint flashed across them. This woman was indeed a scourge if she was left alive. Look at how his nephew was bewitched to the point where his soul left his body. The gloomy underground warehouse was damp and dusty. Yun Shih struggled to open her eyes. The pain seeped in her bones, and her entire heart was trembling. The slightest movement tugged at his wound, causing him to feel an intense pain. Accompanied by a hoarse gasp, in the darkness, a pair of frightened eyes suddenly opened. A beam of moonlight reflected into the eyes, and the pupils suddenly shrank and contracted violently. The incandescent lamp above his head kept swaying, but the surroundings were pitch black. Under the dim light, the lonely shadow pulled at one's heart, making one feel suffocated. After coming back to her senses from the nightmare, the shock in Yun Shih's eyes gradually faded, and she slowly regained her focus. In the blink of an eye, her eyes became cold and calm. In the gloomy underground warehouse, there was a faint moldy smell. In the dim light, Yun Shih's thick black hair draped messily over her shoulders, covering half of her delicate and pretty face. The ends of her hair seemed to be stained with red and sticky blood, and under the cold light, there seemed to be some bruises on her cheeks. Chapter 1142. In the dim light, Yun Shih's thick, black hair draped messily over her shoulders, covering half of her delicate face. The ends of her hair seemed to be stained with red and sticky blood. Under the cold light, there seemed to be some bruises on her cheeks. Her brows were tightly knitted, and her eyes were tightly shut. There was a trickle of blood at the corner of her lips. She gritted her teeth, and her lips were slightly contorted as if she was trying hard to endure something. Yun Shih carefully moved her limbs, but she could not move at all since she was tied up. She did not know if it was because she had been tied up for too long, but her entire body was in excruciating pain. Her whole body was so numb that she had lost all feeling. She tried to move her fingers, and a piercing pain made her suck in a breath of cold air. In her nervousness, she looked around with lingering fear, but when she saw the pool of dried blood at her feet, she felt a stab in her heart. Only then did she remember that what happened just now was not a nightmare at all, but that she was still in this terrifying purgatory with nowhere to run. You're awake. In the darkness, a deep and weathered voice suddenly sounded. Yun Shih opened her eyes and shifted her gaze. In the dim light, she saw a man. It was a middle-aged man. The middle-aged man was wearing a traditional Chinese suit. Sitting on a chair, he appeared to be in high spirits. However, perhaps due to his old age, his hair had already turned white. His slightly weathered face could be vaguely distinguished from his handsome brows. When he was young, he was probably a distinguished and talented man. His eyes, however, were especially sharp like an eagle's. They were as sharp as an awl and had an extremely frightening gaze. His facial features were somewhat similar to Mu Yaja's. Could he be from the Mu family? This suspicion arose in her mind at first, but as she sized him up more closely, her suspicions were confirmed. The middle-aged man in front of her bore some resemblance to Mu Sheng's. Yin Shishir was startled, but she quickly calmed down. Who are you? Hee. You don't need to know who I am. The middle-aged man gave her a sinister smile as he sized her up. Inwardly, he was a little surprised. This girl seemed to have quite the guts. If it were any other girl, they would have been scared out of their wits and tears would have flowed down their cheeks. However, at this moment, other than calmness and vigilance, there was not the slightest bit of fear on her face. It had to be said that this was an unusual woman. You're not afraid of me? Mu Yinjue could not help but ask, feeling that his authority was greatly reduced in front of her. Huh, you're not a ghost. What's there to be afraid of? Even if it's a ghost, I'm not afraid. Yin Shishir was stubborn in her bones. How could she allow herself to show a trace of weakness in front of him? Little girl, you're really extraordinary. Huh? Mu Yinjue chuckled again. Yin Shishir curled her lips coldly. Mister, you seem to be a big shot. Let me ask you, did you kidnap me and bring me here? What is your purpose? I admit that I'm just a nobody, and I don't remember offending you at all, right? You didn't offend me at all. It's just that you have some value to me. Mu Yinjue raised a brow as he tapped the cane in his hand lightly on the ground, making a crisp sound. Chapter 1143. Alarmed, Yin Shishir asked suspiciously, What are you trying to do? Mu Yinjue slowly stood up and walked toward her. He held her face and sized her up for a while. Yin Shishir's hands were tied, so she could not resist at all. She could only glare at him fiercely with her cold eyes to express her repulsion. He caught sight of her stubborn and unyielding gaze and smiled. Young woman, you're really stubborn. You're from the Mu family, aren't you? Yin Shishir suddenly asked. Mu Yinjue's face froze and his lips stiffened before he blurted out. Young lady, sometimes knowing too much isn't necessarily a good thing. Yin Shishir's face, however, turned cold. Her pair of black and bright eyes suddenly shot out a cold glint. Hee, what are you saying? Now that I'm in your hands, what good can you expect from me? Sometimes, knowing when to give in is good for yourself. Hee, give in? That depends on the person. What's the point of caring about my attitude toward a wretched and vulgar person like you? Even Mu Yinjue was taken aback by her coldness and unyielding aura. He glared at her with a livid face. If looks could kill, her face would have been pierced through by his glare. Yin Shishir was not to be outdone, though. She spat at him. This was probably her only weapon now. She cursed under her breath. Get lost. Get your dirty hands off me. Mu Yinjue closed his eyes, and a man beside him immediately took out a handkerchief to wipe his face. Following that, the man glared fiercely at Yin Shishir and was about to step forward aggressively. He clearly wanted to teach this arrogant woman a lesson. Mu Yinjue stopped him, though. Wait. The man was stunned for a moment before saying indignantly, Fourth Master, this woman spoke rudely to you. I'll teach her a lesson. Don't torture her. Just because she's tough doesn't mean that she's tough. Keep her alive. I still have use for her. With that, he turned around and ordered expressionlessly, Send the photos to Dishing Financial Group. Remember, do it cleanly. Yes. Mu Yinjue was about to leave. Yin Shishir called out to him from behind. Hey. He paused in his steps and turned around. She narrowed her eyes. Don't tell me that you're trying to make use of me to usurp power? Oh? I didn't expect a young lady like you to be so smart. Mu Yinjue's lips curled into a sinister and bloodthirsty smile. Forgive me for being blunt. Yin Shishir cocked a brow and sneered. It's nighttime now. Don't daydream. Hee. Mu Yinjue chuckled, but there was anger in his eyes. Let's not talk about whether Mu Yaja will give up his right to inherit the Mu group for me. In my opinion, even if the Mu group is in the hands of an old man like you, without Mu Yaja, it's nothing but a wasteland. Mu Yinjue frowned. There is no need to hide the murderous look in his eyes. Soon, however, he regained his composure. As if he had heard a funny joke, he sneered. Whether the Mu group will be a wasteland in my hands or not, we'll talk about it when you're alive to see it. Chapter 1144. In other words, he intended to kill her. With that, he left with the help of his cane. The heavy shutter door slowly closed, isolating her from the world once more. Yun Shurshu's eyelashes trembled slightly as she sucked in a deep breath of cold air. She did not know how many bones in her body were broken. The wound on her shoulder, which had been split open by the belt, was soaked in salt water. It was excruciating, as if countless poisonous insects were gnawing on it. Every moment, he was being tortured. However, every time she thought of Yu and Xiao Yichen's bright smiles, her will to live rose. Live on. She must live on and never give up on any hope. She clenched her teeth and slowly closed her eyes. Early morning. A servant knocked on the door. "Young master, it's time to get up." Yu sat on the bed and got up abruptly. He did not sleep for the entire night. His physical fatigue could not overcome his nervous state of mind. He tossed and turned in bed and kept his eyes open until dawn. Finally, it was 7:15. He changed into his school uniform, packed his bag, and walked out of his room. After pondering for a moment, he walked to Mu Yichen's room. He pushed the door, only to find it locked from the inside. It seemed that Mu Sheng had already returned to his room to rest. He looked around until he was sure that no one was around before he gently knocked on the door. Soon, light footsteps were heard from the other side of the door. Mu Yichen knocked on the door 3 times in response. It was a tacit signal between the two children. Mu Yichen, too, could not sleep peacefully the entire night. Even when dawn broke, he was still in a state of panic. "Is that you?" Xiao Yichen's uneasy voice sounded from the other side of the door. "Yes, it's me. The door seems to be locked from the inside." You tried again. Sure enough, the door was locked from the inside. "I know," Mu Yichen said gloomily. "You should be going to school soon. Be careful." "Yes, you too." Yu paused and asked worriedly, "Are you okay? I'm worried about you." Inside the room, Mu Yichen leaned against the door as his lips curled into a gentle smile. His heart was filled with joy. "Don't worry, I'm your brother. It's my responsibility to protect you and Mommy." Yu's lips curved into a faint smile. "Don't worry, I will definitely find Mommy. Before that, you have to protect yourself and be vigilant. I'm worried that if you impersonate me, something bad will happen to you. Don't worry about me. You have to be careful too." Yu suddenly heard footsteps coming from the corridor. She immediately said in a low voice, "Someone's coming. I'll leave first." "Yes." Yu hurried to the staircase, but she bumped into Mu Wanru, who happened to be coming upstairs. When Mu Wanru saw him, she couldn't help but smile. She greeted him naturally as usual. "Xiao Yichen, you're awake." "Yes, I'm awake." However, Yu had stopped applying medicine to her wound since last night because she had changed her clothes. Of course, the consequences of stopping the medicine were quite direct and tragic. Initially, the wound was red and swollen with blood clots. The area where she was hit was swollen with numerous blood spots. It was very frightening. After a night without medicine, the area around the wound was bruised, swollen, and painful. Li Hanlin's eyes were filled with pain when he saw this tragic scene. He could not imagine that Yu had endured such an injury for an entire night. Chapter 1146. Yu did not reply. This was the first time he had seen his wound, too. The situation was critical at that time. When Yu saw Mu Sheng raise the cane in Yun Shurshu's hand, he instinctively rushed forward to protect his mommy. It was really an instinctive reaction. He did not have much time to think. Before his brain could react, his body had already rushed forward like an arrow released from a bow. At that time, Yu only felt a pain in his shoulder. When the cane hit him, he was in so much pain that his vision turned black and he fainted from the pain. A child's physique was not like that of an adult's. His body was not fully developed and could be said to be very fragile. If it were Mu Yaja's physique, this fight might not be a big deal, but for the slender and weak Yu, this cane dislocated his shoulder. However, he was glad that his reaction was fast enough to rush forward. He did not dare to imagine the consequences of Mu Sheng's cane hitting his mommy's head if he had reacted a little slower. At the thought of this, a bone-deep hatred surfaced in Yu's eyes, and his gaze became piercingly cold. The doctor first promoted blood circulation and removed blood stasis before applying a hot compress. The pain during this process was indescribable, but Yu endured it. It was extremely painful. He took a few deep breaths and let out a muffled groan, but he still endured it. In the meantime, he took out a USB flash drive containing the data and documents he had copied. He handed it to Lee Hanlon and ordered him to track down the license plate number. Even if the hope was slim, he would not give up on any chance. Yu was worried that Mu Wanru had an ulterior motive for kidnapping his mommy. As for what her motive was, he still had not figured it out. However, her next move should be something else. Yu suddenly pondered for a moment. His eyes flashed as if he had thought of something, and he suddenly stood up. Tiug. His movement was so violent that it affected his muscles and bones. He frowned in pain. Yu hugged his shoulders and sucked in a breath of cold air. Lee Hanlon saw his nervous expression and asked tentatively, "President Yun, what's wrong?" "I'm worried." Yu suddenly turned around and glared at Lee Hanlon. "I'm worried that Mu Wanru's next target will be me." Lee Hanlon was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, "But Co. Yun, you're safe now. We will protect you. Don't worry." Yu frowned. "I'm not worried about me." It was Mui-chin, Mu residence. Mui-chin slowly walked to the window and opened the curtains slightly. He looked out and saw that the armed forces guarding the door had changed, but they were still very strict. A black MPV slowly drove into the Mu residence. He recognized it immediately. It was the car that sent him to school. Mui-chin narrowed his eyes. There was no one in the back seat. It seemed that Yu had successfully escaped. He frowned slightly, but his heart calmed down a little. He returned to the bed and lay down gently. Just as he lay down on the bed, he suddenly heard light footsteps from the corridor. Mui-chin was startled and opened his eyes immediately. His senses were quite sharp. Therefore, even the slightest movement could be caught by him. Chapter 1147. The door was suddenly opened by a servant, and Mu Wanru followed closely behind. She was dressed in a suit with a coat draped over her shoulders. She looked elegant and poised. She glanced at him from the corner of her eyes and casually ordered, "Everyone leave. Let me talk to this child alone." "Yes, young madam." The servant lowered her head and respectfully retreated from the room. Following the sound of the door closing, only the two of them were left in the room. Mui-chin looked at her warily and involuntarily retreated slightly. It was not until his back was against the back of the bed that he raised his head to meet her eyes. Mu Wanru lowered her head to look at him as well. Of course, she did not know that the two little guys had unknowingly swapped identities and that the one sitting in front of her was Yun Tianyu. Thus, she walked to the bedside and sat down sideways. Her eyes slowly focused on him. Mui-chin was not afraid of her scrutiny. Instead, he raised his head and met her gaze expressionlessly. Mu Wanru could not help feeling surprised. This little fellow was a little different from yesterday. Last night, when he looked at her, his eyes were filled with hatred and coldness as he avoided her gaze. Today, however, he did not avoid her gaze. Not only did he not avoid it, but he also met her gaze head-on. His eyes were like cold stars, and his gaze was like a torch. She inched closer to observe him from a close distance. She could not help marveling inwardly. These two little guys really looked alike. It was as if they were carved from the same mold. Even if she tried to discern them carefully, she could not tell who was who. They really looked alike. Mu Wanru's red lips curled up slightly as she slowly asked, "I heard that your name is Yun Tianyu. It's not your place to ask what my name is it?" Mui-chin snorted, clearly not giving her any face. His cold reply, however, was within Mu Wanru's expectations. She smiled, her red lips slightly curled. It was a strange smile, but because of the cold curve of her lips, it added a sense of eeriness. "You little fellow, your face is so tender and cute, but your little mouth is so hard. You're just as despicable as your mother." Mui-chin's eyes flashed with anger. For the first time in his life, he deeply understood what it meant to say that nothing good can come out of a dog's mouth. This woman was a typical example. A layer of coldness floated on his face. On his small face, a somewhat displeased sneer emerged. "Ha ha, despicable? Who is the despicable one here?" Why don't you take a good look at yourself? How dare you talk about my mommy like that? Bad woman. Mui Chin was completely enraged. Before this, he still had some feelings for Mu Wanru. After all, they had been together for 7 years. Although their feelings were not strong, at least, he still had some feelings for Mu Wanru. However, once his bottom line was crossed, he would not tolerate it. Mui Chin also deeply understood that there were two sides to a person, what was on the surface and what was on the inside. If he had not swapped identities with Yu, he really would not have thought that Mu Wanru's true colors were so disgusting. For a moment, the last bit of affection he had for Mu Wanru was completely washed away, as if it had been attacked by a flood. Chapter 1148. In response to his words, Mu Wanru did not get angry. Instead, her red lips parted to reveal her white teeth. Mui Chin saw this smile and found it extremely eerie. This involuntarily reminded him of a certain Disney animation where the supervillain had a vicious stepmother. When she smiled, it was also disgusting. What hateful face. Mui Chin sighed inwardly. While he was silently criticizing her, Mu Wanru spoke again. I didn't expect you to be so protective of your mommy at such a young age. You're a filial child. Mui Chin raised a brow. Her words were like looking at flowers in a fog. For a moment, he did not know what she was trying to say. However, she suddenly asked, Do you want to see your mommy? Hearing this, Mui Chin's eyes narrowed and his voice deepened. Where is she? Mu Wanru smiled coldly with a smug and arrogant expression on her face. You don't need to know where she is. If you want to meet her, I'll bring you there. Mui Chin opened his mouth to speak, but hesitated. His eyes slowly narrowed, and he could not help taking a few more glances at her. Of course, he wanted to go, because he was worried about his mommy. He could not sleep the whole night. He tossed and turned in bed, not knowing her whereabouts. She said that she could bring him to meet her. Mui Chin really wanted to go, even though he knew that Mu Wanru might have ulterior motives. After all, after seeing through Mu Wanru's true colors, he was keenly aware that her motive was not pure. Yu had previously warned him. When the car that sent him to school returned, and he was not in it, it meant that he had safely escaped. Since he had escaped safely, there was no need for him to disguise himself as him. After all, in the current situation, restoring his identity was the safest option. Although the Mu residence was heavily guarded by the armed forces, their target was Yin Tianyu and not him. He was safe. However, Mu Wanru told him that she could take him to see Mommy. Mui Chin's heart stirred. He was somewhat shaken. He knew that his concern would cause him to panic, but his heart would not be at ease if he did not receive any news from his mommy. Mui Chin pondered for a moment and suddenly looked at her suspiciously. His eyes were probing. Don't tell me you have some ulterior motive. What motive do you think I have for you? Mu Wanru smiled contemptuously. Don't worry. I'm just taking pity on you for protecting your eyes. So I'm bringing you to see your mommy. It's up to you whether you want to go or not. This sentence had the intention of loosening the reins only to grasp them better. Mui Chin gritted his teeth and said without hesitation, Fine, take me there. But I'm warning you, don't play any tricks. Mu Wanru sneered. This little rascal actually sternly warned her not to play any tricks. He was just a weak little rascal. What right did he have to warn her? With Mu Wanru's identity, she could naturally enter and leave the Mu residence freely. It was not difficult for her to bring Mui Chin out of the residence without anyone noticing. The car was very far away from the Mu residence. Mui Chin was asked to cover his eyes. Cover your eyes. Was she worried that he would remember the route? Chapter 1149. Mui Chin gave a cold harumph, but didn't resist as he covered his eyes. Did she think that by covering his eyes, he wouldn't be able to remember the journey? During field training, he had to travel back and forth in the forest blindfolded without any tools to tell the direction. He was no stranger to this kind of training. Hence, Mui Chin cooperatively covered his eyes with the blindfold. His cooperation surprised Mu Wanru. This child was too well-behaved, but a child was still a child after all. He was so gullible that he took the bait with just a few words. Mu Wanru was so pleased with herself as she lowered her head to look at Mui Chin's fair and handsome face. Her eyes were suddenly filled with a sinister and cold luster. The moment she thought of how this child was Yin Shishi's flesh and blood, she couldn't help but want to strangle him to death. As she thought of this, her hands were already moving uncontrollably. Mu Wanru suddenly stretched out her hand and tried to strangle him by the throat. However, before her fingertips could touch his neck, Mu Yichin suddenly turned his hand and raised his hand to hold her hand tightly. His hand was small and tender, but for some unknown reason, when he held her hand tightly, those 5 seemingly delicate fingers contained such a terrifying power. So much so that when he held her hand, he used so much strength that it was as if he wanted to break her fingers. Mu Wanru didn't expect his strength to be so terrifying. Her hand was held tightly by him, and she felt a sharp pain from her 4 fingers, which caused her to scream out in pain. Her scream alarmed the chauffeur and bodyguards in the front seat, and they all turned their heads around. They saw that Mu Yichin had subdued her in a few moves. With a grappling hand, he held both her hands behind her back and twisted her 10 fingers into a strange angle. The more she moved, the more pain she felt. Mu Wanru was in so much pain that she broke out in cold sweat. Mu Yichin coldly snorted and suddenly pulled off the black cloth covering his eyes. He coldly said, "I remember that I warned you not to play any tricks." His voice was cold and deep, and his pair of beautiful black and white eyes revealed a bit of killing intent. "You let go." Mu Yichin sneered and twisted the black silk cloth around her hand. The way he tied her up was a standard grappling technique. The knot was not a traditional dead knot. The more she struggled, the tighter the knot was. Mu Wanru shouted coldly, "What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for?" Just as she finished speaking, Mu Yichin was 1 step ahead of the bodyguard in the front passenger seat. The moment the bodyguard pulled out his gun, Mu Yichin reached out and snatched the gun away in half a second. With a flip of his hand, he held the gun in a reverse grip and quickly loaded it. The gun was ready for battle. Mu Yichin pressed the muzzle of the gun against Mu Wanru's temple. The cold and dark hole in the wall emitted a cold air. The moment the muzzle was pressed against Mu Wanru's forehead, her entire body stiffened. The bodyguard she hired was from an international security company. He was a professional with a strong physique and quick reflexes. In the blink of an eye, he actually let a child gain the upper hand. Furthermore, he was a weak 7-year-old child. Mu Wanru could not help but curse angrily. "Trash. Are you trash? You can't even deal with a 7-year-old child?" Chapter 1150. Mu Wanru ignored him and said angrily again, "What are you waiting for? Do you need me to teach you what to do?" However, the bodyguard didn't dare to make a move since the person was in Mu Yichin's hands. He only stared at Mu Yichin's hands, but he had some doubts in his heart. This child's hand gestures when holding a gun were so accurate. It was a little unusual. Mu Wanru saw that the bodyguard was still in a daze and couldn't help but say angrily, "What are you waiting for? Why aren't you taking a gun?" Mu Yichin sneered and glanced at the bodyguard from the corner of his eyes. It was as if he was trying to ask with his eyes, "Do you dare to take the gun from me?" Mu Wanru glanced at Mu Yichin from the corner of her eyes. She was certain that a 7-year-old child wouldn't dare to shoot and kill. With such a fearless thought, she urged again, "Why aren't you doing it? You're a good-for-nothing. Are you really worse than a 7-year-old child?" The bodyguard gritted his teeth and kept quiet for a while. Suddenly, he pounced on Mu Yichin. His movements were extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, his body was about to press down on Mu Yichin. However, Mu Yichin's reaction was faster than his. He lifted his leg and kicked at the bodyguard's chest. Such a big man with a strong physique was kicked back to his original position. He didn't waste any more time and raised his hand. Bang! A silenced gunshot rang out in the car. A bullet was shot at close range and penetrated the man's chest. The bullet then hit the windshield of the car and exploded into pieces. As it was shot at close range, the power of the bullet was almost explosive. It blasted a bloody hole in the man's chest. A line of blood splattered out. It splattered all over Mu Wanru's face. At the same time, it also splattered all over the chauffeur. The chauffeur was petrified as if he had been struck by lightning. The car suddenly braked and stopped at the road junction. At that moment, the car had just passed through the downtown area. Because of the sudden braking, it stopped at the road junction in the suburbs. Along with the sound of engines, a passing truck whizzed past. Mu Wanru's head hit the back of the seat. After the car came to a steady stop, her body returned to its original position. Her entire face was in a state of extreme shock. His eyes bulged out of their sockets, as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. This child, he actually opened fire. Moreover, he had killed a person right in front of her. The blood that splashed onto her face, still boiling hot, seemed to remind her of what had just happened. As for the person who was still alive and kicking just a moment ago, at this moment, he had already turned into a corpse that was gradually turning cold. Lying on the passenger seat, he didn't even have time to close his eyes. It was inexplicably miserable. Mu Wanru's red lips trembled as her eyes darted around frantically. Her eyelashes trembled violently. Mui Chin's cold laughter suddenly rang in her ears. "You really think that I don't dare to shoot?" Mui Chin asked coldly as he pressed the muzzle of the gun even tighter. Mu Wanru caught a glimpse of his finger on the trigger from the corner of her eye. She was so frightened that her entire body was trembling nonstop. Suddenly, she didn't dare to say a word. Mui Chin stared at her coldly, his eyes cold. "Continue driving." Mui Chin turned his head and ordered the chauffeur. Chapter 1151. He was just an ordinary chauffeur. He had never seen such a tragic scene. Beside him was a corpse. Now he was scared out of his wits. "Drive." Mui Chin ordered again. The chauffeur asked for Mu Wanru's opinion with a trembling voice. "Why, young madam, this? Listen to him. Drive." Mu Wanru wanted to live. Although she knew that this child would not necessarily kill her, it would be disadvantageous to her if this dragged on. The chauffeur naturally obeyed the order. He stepped on the accelerator, and the car shot out like an arrow. Along the way, the car sped along, and the scenery outside the window flashed by in a flash. Mu Wanru's hands were tied, and she was thrown to the side of the seat. Her whole body was curled up. Mui Chin leaned against the back of the seat and played with the gun in his hand. To him, the cold gun in his hand was not a lethal weapon, but an ordinary toy. Mu Wanru thought about it and found it very strange. According to the information she had gathered, Yun Tianyu had a weak body and could not possibly be so agile. Mu Wanru sized him up in the corner of her eyes carefully. After careful comparison, the child in front of her seemed to be taller and stronger than the real Yun Tianyu she saw last night. She suddenly recalled something. The child in front of her had such sharp reflexes and such a cold gaze, but it made her think of someone. Could it be Mui Chin? She was startled and silently uttered his name. Mui Chin's eyes darted around coldly. "What's wrong? It's really you." Mu Wanru was so shocked that her face turned ghastly pale. She hated herself for her slow reaction and even more for her carelessness. She had known Mui Chin for 7 years, yet she had mistaken him for Yun Tianyu just because the two children had swapped clothes. Mu Wanru suddenly recalled Yun Tianyu's awkward greeting in front of her this morning. At that time, she had vaguely sensed that something was wrong, but she didn't think too much about it. It was probably because she subconsciously thought that 2 7-year-old children wouldn't be able to scheme to this extent. But now, he was deeply shocked by the quick-wittedness of the two children. How could ordinary children think of this? Mu Wanru gritted her teeth so hard that she almost crushed them. She hated herself for being careless. Mui Chin, however, thought coldly that if he had not swapped identities with Yun Tianyu, he would not be able to see this woman's true and ugly face. The car drove to Kong Zhuang Bridge when the phone suddenly rang. It was from Mu Wanru's bag. Mui Chin opened her bag and took out her phone, only to see an unknown number on the screen. He frowned and cast a sidelong glance at her. "Who's calling?" Mu Wanru remained silent. Mui Chin twisted one of her fingers and broke it. The pain of the dislocated bone caused Mu Wanru to scream. The driver was startled by the sudden scream and broke out in a cold sweat. The car swerved slightly. Mu Wanru broke out in a cold sweat. It's probably fourth uncle." "Answer it." Mui Chin put the phone to her ear and warned coldly. Don't say anything else. Answer the call the way you should. Got it? Aye. I'll remember it. Chapter 1152. Mu Wanru bit her red lip and hurriedly nodded. Why, yes. Mui Chin swiped the screen to answer the call and turned on the speakerphone. How could he give Mu Wanru a chance to play tricks? He turned on the speakerphone right away. He wanted to hear what they had to say. Fourth uncle. Mu Yinjue's voice sounded from the other end. Where's the child? He's already in the car. I'm already on my way there. Mu Wanru's voice still carried a tinge of fear. Mu Yinjue, on the other hand, was sharp and alert. What's wrong with your voice? It sounded a little weird. Mui Chin pressed the muzzle of the gun against her acupoint and squeezed it a little. Mu Wanru resisted the urge to scream. She knew very well that if she screamed, even if Mui Chin did not kill her, he would definitely break a few of her bones. Thus, she tried her best to suppress the trembling in her voice and smiled. It's nothing. I just caught a cold, so my voice is a little hoarse. Where's Mu Sheng? Has he taken his medicine? I've already given it to him. Where is he now? In the bedroom. Hee. I heard that Mu Yaja is on his way back to the country. Everything is going according to my plan. Don't mess it up. Once I get the share transfer agreement, I won't forget to reward you. Mu Wanru's red lips parted, but at this moment, the smile on her face was as ugly as it could be. Her voice was also filled with indescribable bitterness. Hee. Wanru thanks fourth uncle first. The call was quickly hung up. After hearing the entire call, Mui Chin's face turned colder. Did you do something to the great master's medicine? He suddenly spoke, but his voice was abruptly frosty. In an instant, the car seemed to be in an ice cellar. It was bone-chilling. Mu Wanru pursed her lips and nodded slightly in tacit agreement. Then, she tried her best to emphasize, I was also forced to do so. I don't want to hurt Grandpa. Do you think I'll believe you? Mui Chin loaded the gun and asked, What is your purpose? Speak. It's not me. No matter what your motive is, why did you kidnap my mommy? With the muzzle pressed down, Mu Wanru could even feel the cold air coming from the gun hole. She was so scared that she screamed, I'll talk. Speak. Mu Wanru licked her dry lips and told her everything about Mu Yinjue's plan. It turned out that Mu Yinjue's ambition was to take over the majority of the Mu Group's shares. Currently, he did not hold much of the company's shares, only 8%. Thus, even though he was a member of the Mu family, his seat and speaking rights on the board of directors were extremely weak. Hence, he became a little ambitious. He did not care for the position of the Mu family's head. What he wanted was the 70% shares in Mu Yaja's hands. 70%. Just think about it. Even if Mu Yinjue eventually became the head of the Mu family, Mu Yaja still held the majority of the shares in the huge Dishing Financial Group. In the end, the entire Dishing Financial Group was under Mu Yaja's control. Even if he became the head of the Mu family, he did not have much say in the company's business. Chapter 1153. Using Yun Shishir and Yun Tianyu to force Mu Yaja to hand over all his shares. This move could be said to be extremely ruthless. Alas, Mu Wanru still had a trick up her sleeve. She did not mention that even if Mu Yaja handed over his shares, Mu Yinjue might not let Yun Shishir and Yun Tianyu off. The mother and son's final outcome was a dead end. There was no room for negotiation. Mui Chin turned pale with fright when he heard this. This game of chess was really well played. If he forced his father to hand over the Mu Group's shares, his father would fall to the bottom of the valley overnight and be smashed to pieces. This Mu Yinjue was truly a wolf with a terrifying ambition. Where is Mommy hidden? Mui Chin pressed again. Mu Wanru shook her head. I don't know. Mui Chin's eyes flashed with anger as he punched her in the face. You really don't know. Don't try to lie to me. Aren't you bringing me to Mommy now? Mu Wanru howled in pain. She was so frightened that tears fell from her eyes as she cried. I really don't know. That place is in the middle of nowhere. There's no name, and even the GPS can't locate it. It's a very remote place. I really can't tell where it is. Just as she finished speaking, she suddenly coughed and spat out a mouthful of blood. Mu Yichin's punch had actually broken a few of her front teeth. Mu Wanru was still in a state of shock as she stared at the few white teeth amidst the blood. Where did Mu Yichin get his strength from? Don't play tricks. Mu Yichin coldly said. Do you really think that I won't dare to shoot you? It's true. I'm really not lying to you. Even if you shoot me with bullets, I really don't know where that place is. At this point, do I still need to hide anything from you? Mu Yichin pursed his lips and sneered. He suddenly raised his wrist, activated the DPS tracking function on his watch, and sent a tracking message to Yun Tianyo's watch. The car sped along. His signal would be transmitted to Yun Tianyo's watch every 1 kilometer. Mu Yichin put away his gun. Mu Wanru heaved a sigh of relief when she saw his action. Just now, she was so frightened by him that she almost wet her pants. Mu Wanru wanted to cry, but had no tears. She never thought that she would be defeated by a child. The car was still moving at a high speed. However, as time passed, the scene outside the window became more and more desolate. It seemed that this was a rather remote place. Mu Yichin looked at his watch. The GPS signal was getting weaker in the wilderness. Mu Wanru did not lie to him. In such a desolate area, even if he wanted to, it would be difficult for him to pinpoint the location accurately. 10 minutes later, the car stopped at a deserted place. Mu Yichin put the rope around Mu Wanru's neck and pulled her out of the car as if he were leading a dog. Mu Wanru suddenly felt a sharp pain in her neck. She felt strangled and suffocated as she rolled out of the car. Bring me there, Mu Yichin ordered. His height did not reach her chest, so Mu Wanru had to lower her body to cooperate with him as she carefully followed behind him. At this moment, she firmly believed that even if this boy did not have a gun, he could easily kill her. Chapter 1154. Following Mu Wanru's direction, Mu Yichin arrived at the entrance of the warehouse. He kicked the door open with all his might. Soon, a commotion could be heard from inside. Who is it? A man's questioning voice could be heard from inside. He didn't open the door for everyone who came. Mu Yichin tugged at the rope around Mu Wanru's neck. Mu Wanru cried out in pain and hurriedly shouted, It's me. Quickly open the door. Quickly. A series of noises could be heard from inside. The door to the warehouse slowly opened. Mu Yichin grabbed Mu Wanru and pressed the loaded gun in his hand against her forehead. Mu Wanru had undoubtedly become his hostage. If everything went smoothly, he could use Mu Wanru as an exchange to redeem his mother. Even though he knew that this move was a little dangerous, he was still very confident that he could bring his mother out of this unscathed. Perhaps, from a certain point of view, Mu Yichin was smart at times, but this intelligence did not seem to be thoughtful enough. Mu Wanru was indeed a hostage in his hands. However, he did not think carefully about whether Mu Wanru or Yun Shishir was more important to Mu Lianjue. To him, Yun Shishir could be exchanged for Mu Yaja's shares. Mu Wanru, on the other hand, was merely a chess piece that was not important to him. Once she lost her value, she was a chess piece that could be casually discarded. She was not worthy of his attention at all. Hence, Mu Yichin's current thinking was a little too naive. Could he use Mu Wanru as a bargaining chip to redeem Yun Shishir? However, at this critical juncture, this was all he could think of. It was still the same saying, too much concern made one confused. In a way, he was not as calm as Yun Tianyu, so it was not easy for him to think so much. The door to the warehouse slowly opened, and everyone came out to welcome them. However, when they saw Mu Yichin standing at the door, their gazes fell on Mu Wanru, who was being held by him. They were confused and did not immediately understand the situation. What was going on? Mu Wanru raised her head and saw them. She could not help crying out, Save! Save her! Quickly save her! Shut up! Mu Yichin turned his head and swept a glance at the group standing at the door. All of them were tall and muscular, especially the man who stood at the head of the group. He had a scar across his entire face, making him look ferocious and terrifying. He pursed his lips and asked coldly, Where is she? Where did this little brat come from? He's still wet behind the ears. Look at him. He hasn't weaned yet, right? What is he up to now? A man in the crowd sneered mercilessly. This person was none other than the man who had wanted to defile Yun Shishir that day. He looked at Mu Yichin with disdain as he sneered at him. However, before he could finish his words, Mui Chin raised his hand and pulled the trigger. Along with the sound of a gunshot, a bullet pierced through the air, and in a split second, the bullet accurately hit his glabella. That man still had a contemptuous sneer on his face, but a bloody hole suddenly appeared between his brows. The back of his head exploded, and red and white blood splattered on the people beside him. After the bullet pierced his glabella, it hit a man behind him and penetrated his shoulder. Chapter 1155. Mui Chin was holding a desert eagle in his hand. It was very powerful and had a considerable lethality. The sound of gunshot left everyone dumbfounded. The man who was shot between the eyebrows fell to the ground weakly and stopped breathing. Circles of blood rippled out, but it was real and dazzling. Everyone was inexplicably shocked. Who would have thought that a 7-year-old child could raise his hand and shoot so accurately and hit someone between the eyebrows? His shooting skills were so outstanding. Such terrifying shooting skills could only be achieved by adults who had received professional training. How did this child do it? While admiring Mui Chin's outstanding shooting skills, the leader of the knife-scarred men looked carefully again and saw Mui Chin holding Mu Wanru. He narrowed his eyes and recognized this woman who had been ravaged beyond recognition. She was half his master, and a trace of nervousness appeared on his face. Where is she? Mui Chin raised his arrogant chin slightly and signaled to them with a pair of cold eyes. His thin lips opened slightly, and a cold voice escaped. Take me to see her. See who? The knife-scarred man was stunned. Perhaps it was hard to imagine such a strange scene in front of him at this moment. A 7-year-old child holding an adult woman in his hands and pointing a gun at her. He was mature and steady, but it was not like a child of this age at all. Mui Chin was too lazy to talk to them. The muzzle of the gun was pressed against Mu Wanru's temple. Such a threatening action, but Mu Wanru was not happy with it. She was so scared that her legs were trembling. She hurriedly shouted, "Take him to see Yun Sure. Why aren't you taking him to see her?" The knife-scarred man's eyes revealed a hint of danger, but he had no intention of dodging. What? Are you resisting me? Mui Chin's eyes were also cold. He was not afraid of his majesty at all and asked coldly. Mu Wanru was so shocked that she could not form a coherent sentence. She just kept repeating, "Take him to see her. Take him to see her. He really knows how to shoot. Don't underestimate this kid. He really knows how to shoot." The knife-scarred man's expression changed a little. Then, he turned his gaze and gestured. The crowd slowly opened up a path. Mui Chin, on the other hand, was very vigilant. He coldly swept his gaze over the crowd and coldly said, "Throw away all your spears, sticks, and knives." Everyone immediately threw their weapons aside and kicked them far away. Mui Chin scanned the area again and sneered. He quickly raised his wrist and pulled the trigger. The bullet whizzed through the air and hit the pistol that the scarred man had carefully hidden. Pong! Sparks flew in all directions from the friction of metal. He threw the pistol on the ground as if it was scalding his hand. There was a bloody mark on his palm. It was grazed by the whistling bullet. This child, how extraordinary! He secretly sighed in his heart, but he never expected that this child not only had good marksmanship, but also extremely sharp observation skills. Do I need to repeat the names of the others? Mui Chin pointed the gun at another man who looked uneasy. "You in your pants, gun." The man quivered. Then, as if he was throwing away a hot potato, he took out the pistol hidden in his pants pocket and threw it aside. When the others saw this, they also threw away their hidden guns and ammunition far away. "Are you satisfied now?" The knife-scarred man said fiercely. He seemed to be gnashing his teeth. Chapter 1156. Mui Chin narrowed his eyes. Only after confirming that there were no more lethal weapons on them did he slowly walk up to them. The tip of his toe hooked the gun that the scarred man had just thrown to the ground and caught it. "You bring me there. The rest of you get lost." Mui Chin gave his order again. Everyone looked at each other, but the scarred man sneered. "All of you get lost. Do you hear me?" Thus, the rest moved to the side. Only then did Mui Chin walk up and point at the scar man. "Bring me there. I'm warning you. Don't play any tricks." "Hee hee, you little rascal. You're so powerful. How would I dare to play any tricks? The scarred man said this, but it was unclear whether it was sarcasm or mockery. If Yin Tianyu were present at this moment, he would definitely have more considerations. For example, with Mu Yinjue's means and power, why would he only assign this mob to guard an important person? There should be a large group of armed men around. Alas, Mu Yiqin did not think so much. He was anxious to see Yin Shishir, so he did not think about why there were only a few ruffians guarding such a huge warehouse. He followed the scar man inside. The heavy shutter door slowly closed behind them as the three entered the warehouse. Only a small incandescent lamp was lit in the huge warehouse. The whole place was dark, heavy, and airtight. There was only a small skylight for ventilation. In the dim light, the air was filled with dust. Mu Yiqin was on his guard again. He held Mu Wanru tightly in his hand as he cautiously surveyed his surroundings. The scarred man led him to a metal cage. Mu Yiqin's eyes landed on the woman in the cell as he stopped in his tracks. Yin Shishir was curled up in a corner. Her white dress was stained with mottled bloodstains, which bloomed like a conspicuous and glaring thistle. Some of the bloodstains looked fresh and bright red. Some of the bloodstains were dark. At this moment, her originally jet-black hair hung messily on her shoulders, like seaweed mixed with sand. Her originally fair and flawless face was mixed with blood and salt water, and her wet bangs clung to her cheeks, making her look battered and exhausted. Her hands were chained to the cage, and it was difficult for her to break free. However, her slender arms were so weak and boneless that they seemed to be about to be broken the next moment. Beside the cell stood two soldiers in military uniforms. They were fully armed, and their expressions were cold and stern. They stood upright. Mu Yiqin's dark pupils violently when he saw this scene. Anger flashed across his face as he raised his gun, grabbed Mu Wanru's hair, and pointed it at her eyebrows. "Is it you? Are you the one who tortured her?" Mu Wanru's face was filled with horror as she hurriedly cried for help. "Don't. Help. Help. Shut up." Mu Yiqin shoved the gun muzzle in her mouth and loaded it. "Otherwise, I'll break your mouth." Mu Wanru turned pale with fright. With the muzzle in his mouth, when he loaded the gun, every tiny sound made by the gun made her hair stand on end. Chapter 11:57. She didn't want to die. Mu Wanru screamed in despair at her heart. Her eyes were wide open, and large drops of tears fell from her eyes. Her pitiful look triggered the disgust in his heart. Mu Yiqin pressed the gun against her throat fiercely. His eyes were bloodshot as he held the trigger tightly while he ate. "What did you do to my mommy? What did you do to her?" He was like an injured little beast, roaring in her ears. Mu Wanru was terrified and didn't dare to move. She could only open her eyes and make intermittent sounds. "No, don't. Don't kill her. She didn't want to die. She really didn't want to die. Let her go." Mu Yiqin raised his head. His eyes were bloodshot, and his lips curled into a cold smile. "Let my mommy go." The scar-faced man was indifferent and looked at him coldly. Mu Yiqin's heart stopped. "What? I told you to let her go. Didn't you hear me?" "I heard you, but I can't do it," the scar-faced man said coldly. "Her life is still in my hands." Mu Yiqin grabbed Mu Wanru's hair and signaled with his eyes. "How about we make a deal? This deal is not worth it." The scar-faced man snorted. "I didn't expect you to come knocking on our door. It saves us the effort of tying you up." "What do you mean?" The scar-faced man laughed deeply and then clapped his hands lightly. Soon, the lights in the warehouse lit up. As the lights lit up, the darkness retreated. In the warehouse, more than 10 armed forces were exposed under the lights. Every one of them was fully armed and looked alert. Mu Yiqin's eyes swept across the room, only to be stunned. Just from their attire, he could tell that these soldiers were from the special training camp. Their combat power was definitely not to be underestimated. The scar-faced man sneered. "Ha! Do you think you can walk out of here unscathed? A child is a child after all. Extremely naive." Mu Yiqin gritted his teeth. His eyes seemed to be dyed with blood. Because of his suppressed anger, his entire body was trembling. The knife-scarred man looked at his face with satisfaction and smiled slightly. His gaze then fell on Mu Wanru, and he said bluntly, "As for the woman in your hands, you can kill her or torture her as you wish. In any case, it's impossible for us to release him." Mui Chin sucked in a deep breath of cold air as his furious gaze landed on Mu Wanru's face. He was disappointed in her and hated her to the core. Even though he wasn't related to this woman by blood, he still had some feelings for her. At this moment, his heart was filled with mixed feelings. Over the past 7 years, the pain and regret of acknowledging a thief as his mother, coupled with the pain and injuries his mother suffered, made his heart surge with indescribable pain. How hateful! He wished he could shoot her to death. Mui Chin pressed the muzzle of the gun against her forehead and was about to pull the trigger when Mu Wanru screamed and cried, "Don't kill me! Don't kill me! Shaoi Chin, do you really have the heart to kill me?" Chapter 1158. "Don't!" Mu Wanru screamed again. Her shrill voice reverberated in the warehouse. Mui Chin's lips were cold, but his fingers were trembling on the trigger. Mu Wanru put down her pride and begged, "Don't kill me. I'm your mommy. I'm your mommy." Mui Chin shouted, "Shut up. You're not my mommy." Mu Wanru's face froze for a moment before her lips curled into a bitter smile. "Yes, sir. Yes. You're not my biological child. But do you know why? It's because Mu Yaja lied to me. Your daddy lied to me and said that I'm infertile. He lied to me so bitterly. That's why I hate him so much. That's not an excuse for you to hurt my mommy. Listen to me. Listen to me." Mu Wanru tried to calm him down and said in a gentle voice, "Shaoi Chen, don't you remember? When you were born, I was the one who held you in my arms. Not her." Mui Chin was stunned, and his eyes flickered. Mu Wanru saw a hint of wavering in his eyes and was secretly delighted. She put on a pitiful look and said tearfully, "When you first learned how to walk, you always fell down. You've been very resilient since you were young. Even if it hurts, you won't cry and will hold back your tears. I was the one who held you in my arms and comforted you over and over again. Have you forgotten?" He never forgot. He had a conscience. So he admitted that although Mu Wanru didn't treat him like her own, she took good care of him. "When your daddy sent you to the special training camp, I always stood up and objected. It was because I couldn't bear to see you suffer and get hurt. Every time I saw you come back with injuries, I would cry. Have you forgotten?" Mui Chin shut his eyes abruptly, but he quickly opened them again. There were some emotions struggling in his eyes. "You were just putting on a show. Shut up. Stop talking." "Good. Even if it's just a show." Mu Wanru paused for a moment before continuing her persuasion. "Even if Mu Yinjue instructed me to kidnap you and force Mu Yaja to give up the Mu Group's shares, I still couldn't bear to do it to you despite having so many opportunities. Was this also a show? In order to protect you, I didn't hesitate to offend." "Shut up. Although we aren't related by blood, I really have feelings for you." "Don't you? You don't have it." "Shut up." Mui Chin was on the verge of collapse, and his expression was one of struggle. Mu Wanru saw the opportunity and suddenly broke free from his grip. She turned around and ran towards the scarred man in a sorry state. Bang! A gunshot rang out. Mui Chin subconsciously raised his wrist and fired a shot at her. No matter how Mu Wanru played the family card and begged him to be merciful, he subconsciously realized that if he didn't get rid of her, who knew what kind of harm his mother would suffer if she fell into her hands again? He subconsciously fired a shot at her. However, because he was distracted, he did not aim properly. The bullet whizzed through the air and penetrated her abdomen. Seeing this, Mui Chin gritted his teeth and raised his hand again. He aimed at the back of her head, wanted to give her another shot. "Stop!" The scar-faced man shouted coldly as he stood in front of Mu Wanru. Chapter 1159. Mui Chin sneered. He was not at all afraid of the crisis before him. The scar-faced man, however, signaled him with his cold eyes. Mui Chin looked in the direction he was hinting and saw 2 soldiers walking toward the cell. They raised their pistols and aimed them at Yun Shirshi's temple. She, who was unconscious, did not know what kind of danger she was in. Her head was still lowered, and she did not feel anything. "Put down the gun." Mui Chin's hand, which was holding the pistol, trembled violently. His eyes were bloodshot, and his whole body was shaking uncontrollably. Put down the gun. I have no patience. This is my last warning, or else. No. Mui-chin gritted his teeth and slowly threw the gun to the ground. Kick it over here. The scar-faced man threatened again. Kick the gun over here. Mui-chin stretched out his leg and kicked the gun to the side. A soldier behind him strode forward, raised the gun in his hand high, and hit the back of his neck hard. Mui-chin only felt a numbing sensation as if he had been electrocuted. His vision turned black, and he fainted, unconscious. A Bentley slowly drove into the Mu residence. Muyaja alighted from the car and was surprised to see the armed forces heavily surrounding the entrance. He frowned and quickly strode into the residence. Young master, you're back. Where's Grandpa? Master, he's upstairs. He hasn't woken up yet. It's already afternoon. Why isn't he awake yet? Muyaja said as he walked upstairs. When he pushed open the door, he saw Mu Sheng lying on the bed. His face was pale and lifeless. His heart skipped a beat. He walked over and held his face, squinting his eyes. How long has he been asleep? Young master. Master drank his medicine at 3 in the morning and fell asleep. Muyaja frowned. He bent down slightly and called out, Grandpa! Grandpa! Mu Sheng did not wake up, though, and there was no reaction. Instead of saying that he was in a deep sleep, it was more like he was dead. There was no sign of life at all. If not for his feeble breathing, Muyaja would really suspect that he had passed away just like that. Where's the doctor? Call the doctor over. He raised his head and ordered. Soon, the private doctor rushed over. Take a look at him. What's going on? Yes, yes. The doctor did not dare to delay and went forward to check. Muyaja walked to the side and dialed Mui-chin's number, but the latter's phone was switched off. At this time, school should be over. Why is his phone? Just as he was wondering, the chauffeur rushed over. When he saw him, he was stunned for a moment before he hurriedly reported, Young master, bad news. Young master is missing. Missing? What? The kindergarten teacher said that she didn't see the young master in the morning, and I didn't pick him up after school. You didn't see him enter the school gate. I saw him enter the school gate with my own eyes. The chauffeur hurriedly explained, looking aggrieved. He's in a coma. We need to send him to the hospital immediately. Poisoned? Yes. Master's lips are purple, his body is stiff, and his face is ashen. These are typical symptoms of poisoning. We need to send him to the hospital immediately. Muyaja frowned from the headache. His voice was terrifyingly cold. Send him to the hospital quickly. Chapter 1160. Muyaja's chest heaved up and down as he walked to the door. How did the Mu family fall into chaos in just 2 days of being overseas? The asterisk imminent. He had let his guard down. Mu Sheng was hurriedly sent to the hospital. Muyaja got into the car and instructed the chauffeur to rush to the company. On the other end, Minyu called. Boss, are you back in the country? Yes, I'll be there soon. Okay, I'll wait for you there then. His tone was urgent and nervous, but he did not tell him what was going on. In fact, he had just received an anonymous letter. When he opened it, he saw a few shocking photos. He hurriedly called Muyaja to report the situation. However, he was afraid that he would get nervous if he heard it. To ensure his boss's safety, he forcibly suppressed his nervousness. At the same time, Yin Tianyu, who was frowning at Luji's headquarters, received a GPS location message from Mui-chin. When Mui-chin sent the location, he also used his watch's voice function to send a 10-second message. Yu, follow the GPS location I sent you and find the place where Mommy is hidden. Once he received the message, he immediately logged into the system. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he entered a series of commands. An interface popped up on the screen. He logged in and searched. The GPS initially had a strong signal, but when he reached the Kongzhuang Bridge, the signal became intermittent and gradually became unclear. Even if he used advanced technology, he could not pinpoint the location clearly. Fortunately, Mui-chin sent him the car plate number in addition to the GPS location. Yin Tianyu investigated the car plate number and simulated a route based on the car's driving record. However, this route was completely cut off when it reached the Conjuan Bridge. What's going on? Yu squinted his eyes. He pulled up the satellite map of that area and entered the coordinates. Unexpectedly, after the Conjuan Bridge, the area was barren and uninhabited. There was a farm in this area. Later, because the city government wanted to build an industrial park, the farm was demolished. However, halfway through the construction of the industrial park, the entire city protested. Many citizens jointly submitted a petition to cancel the construction of the industrial park. The ecological environment in Jingdu was very bad, and the smog was very bad. If an industrial park was built, wouldn't the pollution be even worse? Due to the protests of the entire city, the project was temporarily put on hold. Later on, the main government withdrew their investment and looked for a new location. Just like that, this area was abandoned. But at the very least, they had locked onto an area and had a clear direction. Yin Tianyu looked at the map outlined with red lines on the screen. This area was at least several 100,000 square meters. They could only find the exact location by doing a carpet search. This was a rather huge project. Director Yin. Li Hanlin knocked on the door and entered. Yin Tianyu raised his head with a frown. "What's wrong?" he said slowly. "The mercenaries sent by the Hurricane Group have arrived in the capital." "All right, take me there." Just as Yin Tianyu stood up, Li Hanlin suddenly said in a low voice, "This time, Hurricane Group has sent another person." "Who?" "The chief commander of Hurricane Group, Gong Jie." Chapter 1161. Hurricane Group was a familial arms group. Its three chief commanders, Gong Jie, Ji Yinshi, and Elan, were all legendary figures. Gong Jie, in particular, was one of them. He was the core member of Hurricane Group's top management. He was in charge of the arms market in North America and Europe and was fully in charge of the European market. He was a very decisive person. It was said that Gong Jie was the crown prince of Hurricane Group. His father, Gong Shaoying, was the founder of Hurricane Group. He used to be a smuggler and was now the king of arms who controlled half of the arms market. Gong Jie was only 12 years old when he made his debut. To train him, Gong Shaoying put the North American market under his name. In just 3 years, he had become a formidable figure. Now, he was in his 20s, but with his cold and unique methods, he was already the leader of Hurricane Group. He was also the core member of Hurricane Group's Deva project. He had a group of super powerful mercenaries under him. Mercenary Paradise, which was under Hurricane Group, was also established by him. He was quite a legendary figure. Yin Tianyu frowned slightly. Was he not in charge of the European market? Why was he here? He could not help feeling puzzled. Seeing his puzzled expression, Li Hanlin raised his brows and smiled. It's probably because the Hurricane Group wants to probe Mr. Yun's background. That's why they sent such a big shot here. Where are they now? Li Hanlin answered in a low voice. Maisel Private Airport. Let's go. His lips curled into a nonchalant smile. I'll go meet this rumored big shot. Maisel Private Airport. When Yin Tianyu and Li Hanlin arrived, an armed transport plane was already parked at the airport. More than 10 mercenaries alighted from a plane. They were tall and burly and were fully armed. Just as Yin Tianyu stepped out of the car, he heard the sound of a helicopter's propeller cutting through the air above him. He raised his head and saw an armed helicopter slowly hovering in the air a few times before landing steadily on the tarmac. The cabin door opened, and 5 mercenaries walked out one after another. After a while, a young man in a military windbreaker slowly walked out of the plane. Yin Tianyu looked over. In the fierce wind, the young man was wearing a snow-white military windbreaker. His sleeves were fluttering in the wind. His white military suit made him look tall and straight. This person seemed to be very fond of the color white. With a white military cap, a white military jacket, and snow-white military boots, he looked very handsome. The man slowly raised his face, and a handsome face fell into his eyes. Initially, he thought that Gong Jie was of European descent. However, she did not expect him to be an Asian man. She had a head full of neat and tidy silvery hair, and her face was as thin as a knife. Especially the curve of her lower jaw. It was so beautiful that it looked like a fine brushwork. The man had a face that seemed to be exquisitely sculpted. His facial features were exquisite and well-defined, as if they were carved by a knife. His eyebrows were handsome, and his eyes were like cold stars. His eyebrows and eyes were extremely beautiful. His long and narrow eyes revealed a bit of evil and arrogance. His black and white eyes were clear, without any impurities. They were as elegant as an ink painting. Chapter 1162. The man was unexpectedly young. From his facial features alone, one could tell that he was in his early 20s. He had the handsomeness and cleanness of a young man. Even if it was a man, he would probably be deeply impressed by this beauty that had nothing to do with gender. Even though his handsomeness was in between the sexes, with a hint of androgynous feminine beauty, his beauty was destructive. His deep-set and perfect facial features, as well as his elegant bearing, especially his every frown and smile, revealed his extraordinary aristocratic temperament. He even had the demeanor of a king who looked down on all living things. This kingly demeanor could be seen from his appearance. It was as if he was the ruler of the world. It was natural, cold, arrogant, and evil. There was a cynical smile on his lips. It was just an occasional glance, but it revealed a sense of aggressiveness and sharpness. Yin Tianyo's gaze slowly landed on his face, and he was secretly shocked. A hint of surprise surfaced on his face. What surprised him was that this man's features were shockingly similar to Yun Shishir's. His eyes, in particular, were 70% similar. The difference, however, was that Yun Shishir's eyes were beautiful and charming, while his were devilish and wild. His brows furrowed deeply, and he could not help but suspect the man's identity. At the side, Li Hanlin bent his head and whispered in his ear, "Director Yin, this man can't be the rumored second Master Gong, right?" Second Master Gong, the leader of Hurricane Group, Gong Shaoying, had a total of 4 children. Gong Jie, on the other hand, was ranked second, so everyone respectfully addressed him as Second Master Gong. Yin Tianyu narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice, "I've never seen Gong Jie's real appearance." As the core figure of Hurricane Group, few people knew of Gong Jie's real appearance, but judging from this man's extraordinary demeanor, he was most likely Second Master Gong himself. The two groups of people gathered together. Sure enough, this man in white military attire was none other than Gong Jie himself. Gong Jie and Yin Tianyu looked at each other. The two of them stood facing each other. Gong Jie sized up the little munchkin in front of him who only reached his waist with interest. For a moment, he couldn't help but find it interesting. Thus, he elegantly squatted down, his beautiful and deep eyes looking deeply at the little munchkin. In the depths of his dark eyes, there was a flash of surprise. He couldn't help but smile as he slowly extended his hand. "I didn't expect the legendary military genius to be only 6 years old." Gong Jie's lips curled into a smile. "Yin Tianyu, if you remember correctly, it should be this name." Recently, Gong Jie had been handling a batch of arms orders in the North America market. However, he received news from the headquarters that the legendary genius youth was going to officially join the Hurricane Group. Therefore, he conveniently came to pay his respects to him. Who exactly was this genius who was rumored to have been invited to participate in the development of the Heavenly Eye project at the age of 6? However, when he saw it with his own eyes, the genius who participated in the Hurricane Group's Heavenly Eye development plan and proposed to monopolize the military by controlling the air power was really only 6 years old. It was really an eye-opener for him. Yin Tianyo's eyes drooped slightly as they fell on Gong Jie's outstretched hand. His fingers were fair and slender, and his fingertips were as beautiful as jade. He slowly reached out his hand and shook it with him. Yu raised his eyes and smiled elegantly. "I didn't expect the rumored chief commander of Hurricane Group to be so young. However, I have to remind you of something." Chapter 1163. "I've already passed my 7th birthday," Yu corrected. "So, strictly speaking, I'm already 7 years old." Gong Jie was speechless. This lad, he even knew how to have a dry sense of humor. Yin Tianyu and Gong Jie shook hands and sized each other up at the same time. Gong Jie's gaze was a little judgmental. Yin Tianyo's eyes were probing as well. Looking at his face up close, Yu was even more shocked. Why did this man look so much like his mommy? If you were to put aside his attire and hairstyle, he could not help thinking that his mommy was standing right in front of him. Similar. They really looked alike. It was hard not to make a connection between him and his mommy. Gong Jie was also secretly sizing up the little lad. The child in front of him stood elegantly in a small suit with a windbreaker draped over his shoulders. He looked even more handsome and exquisite. His small face, in particular, was tender, fair, and delicate. His facial features were beautiful, and his eyebrows were set with a maturity that was rare even for an adult man. What was even more remarkable was that this 7-year-old child did not feel oppressed by his aura, even though he was standing in front of him. It was as if he was born with an extraordinary elegance and nobility. Even when he looked into his eyes, there was not a hint of timidity in his eyes. He was not simple. It was hard to imagine that this child, whose voice was tinged with immaturity, could actually come up with such a shocking air superiority theory. Could it be that children nowadays were all so valiant? Gong Jie silently cursed in his heart. Could this child be a genetically mutated species? For the past 2 years, Hurricane Group had been trying its best to invite Yin Tianyu to officially join them. However, the response he gave was always ambiguous and not accurate. Now, however, Yin Tianyu's sudden decision to officially join Hurricane Group came as a surprise. I heard that you've decided to officially join Hurricane Group? Yes. Yu looked up. I've decided to officially join Hurricane Group. He wanted to become stronger. He was so powerful that everyone feared his existence. So strong that he had incomparably terrifying power. Only then could he better protect the people he wanted to protect. Yu's eyes were filled with determination. Gong Jie smiled and held his hand even tighter. His clear and deep voice slowly escaped from his thin lips. In that case, on behalf of the Hurricane Group, I officially welcome you to join us. Standing at the side, Li Hanlin's gaze fell on the tightly intertwined hands of Yin Tianyu and Gong Jie. At this moment, he suddenly had an indescribable intuition. His intuition told him that Yin Tianyu would create an era for him once he joined Hurricane, an era that belonged to Yin Tianyu. Although this child was still young, his body seemed to contain endless energy. He believed that the future Hurricane Group would belong to him. Dishing Financial Group. Muyaja walked all the way into the CEO's office. As he walked, a terrifying and gloomy aura overflowed from his body. The staff at the side retreated one after another, intimidated by his aura. In the CEO's office, Minyu had been waiting for a long time with a nervous and anxious look. Muyaja casually threw his jacket on the sofa and glanced at him with furrowed brows. "What's that in your hand?" The moment he entered the room, he keenly noticed a stack of envelopes in Minyu's hand. He could not help feeling suspicious. Chapter 1164. Muyaja took the envelope and opened it. A few photos fell out of the envelope. He picked up the photo and glanced at it. His eyes were instantly dyed with a bit of gloominess, and his brows were tightly knitted together. In the photo, there was a woman with her arms hung high in the air with chains. On his wrist, the bloodstain caused by the tight grip was particularly eye-catching. The background was a dark warehouse. With a flash, he could vaguely see the dust flying in the air. Yin Shishir's face was stained with blood. She was clenching her teeth stubbornly. He could imagine how miserable she was from the bloodstains on her body. However, he couldn't imagine what she had gone through. Perhaps it was a scene that he didn't dare to imagine. Muyaja sucked in a deep breath of cold air and gripped the photo tightly. His eyes were as dark as a black fog. When his gaze landed on Yin Shishir's white dress, which was stained with blood, in the photo, his eyes turned even redder. Who sent this photo over? He looked up and stared at Minyu coldly. Even Minyu, who had always been by his side and was used to his terrifying aura, was shocked by his gaze. "Boss, this letter was sent by a courier." Minyu paused for a moment and continued. "We have the person under control. However, it seems that we can't get any clues from him. Is there nothing else other than this letter?" "Yes, there's only this letter. There are only a few photos in the letter. Minyu was stunned. He looked at Mu Yaja's cold face and immediately said in a deep voice, "Boss, please calm down first. Looking at the current situation, it is very likely that this is no ordinary kidnapping." However, Mu Yaja was calmer than he thought. He sat back at his desk and threw the photos on the table with a deep frown. "I know." Minyu was stunned. However, he slowly said, "This person is targeting me." "Boss, what do you mean by that? I don't quite understand." Mu Yaja frowned and said slowly, "What he wants is with me. Naturally, he must have some important bargaining chips in his hands to get what he wants from me." However, Minyu was still confused. After thinking about it carefully, he suddenly realized something. "Boss, do you mean that you've already guessed the motive of the mastermind? He's finally made his move." Mu Yaja pursed his lips tightly, his eyes becoming increasingly gloomy. Minyu frowned and looked at him. Mu Yaja's voice was very deep and low. From his stiff expression and his white knuckles, it was clear that he was trying his best to restrain his anger so that he wouldn't lose his mind. The only reason he sent these photos was to provoke him. Provoking him, angering him. The angrier he was, the more out of control he was, the more they wanted him to be. Mu Yaja closed his eyes and forced himself to calm down. Especially at times like this, he had to be even calmer in order to stabilize the situation. However, when he received an unfamiliar email that night, he couldn't calm down anymore. On the computer screen was the side profile of a child. The child's delicate little face was covered in blood. Mu Yaja's heart felt as if it had been hit by a hammer. It was so painful that he almost suffocated. What came over from all directions was endless anger and pity. Chapter 1165. He stared coldly at the photo on the screen and clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked. His handsome face instantly paled to the point that it was outrageous. He recognized at a glance that the bloodied child in the photo was none other than Mu Yichen. "Follow this IP address and investigate," Mu Yaja ordered coldly. Upon receiving the order, Minyu immediately investigated. Mu Yaja looked at the screen again and saw that Mu Yichen's hands were tied and his entire body was suspended in midair. The photo only showed his upper body, but even so one could clearly see the whip marks all over his body. His white shirt was stained red with blood and was tattered. Especially the wound on his abdomen, it was frighteningly deep. It was a bloody mess. It was unknown what kind of whipping he had suffered. His entire body was covered in cuts and bruises. It was a ghastly sight. What kind of cruel torture did he suffer to end up in such a sorry state? Looking at his pink face again, his eyes were half opened. His originally clear and beautiful eyes were covered by his messy forehead hair. However, the gaze that shot out from his eyes was cold and dark, revealing a bloodthirsty chill. Even so, even though he was in a sorry state, it did not affect his elegant and arrogant demeanor. He tried his best to maintain a calm expression, but from his eyes, one could see that he was trying his best to endure. He was enduring the pain all over his body. Even though he was covered in blood, he did not show any signs of weakness or even pain in his eyes. No matter how terrible the torture was, he did not seem to lose his arrogant and elegant demeanor. The corners of his lips curved into a casual smile, but there was a hint of sarcasm on his beautiful face. He was proud and unruly. No one could blaspheme his kingly demeanor. Mu Yichen had never suffered like this before. Even when he was in the special training camp, he had never suffered such inhumane torture. Who was so cruel and merciless? Damn it! Mu Yaja slammed his fist on the table, causing the solid wood surface to crack a few times due to his forceful punch. Leji headquarters. Gong Jie sat in the CEO's office, still unable to calm his astonishment. The CEO's office in front of him was full of technology. It was unimaginable that this company was on the verge of bankruptcy a few years ago, with its assets in tatters. When they acquired Leji and put the company under Yun Tianyo's name, they did so with a playful attitude. Firstly, Hurricane Group wanted to see how this genius youngster would perform in front of a company that had lost all prospects and development potential. Secondly, they wanted to train this arrogant lad. However, He had witnessed with his own eyes how Laji Holdings had transformed from a toy company that was on the decline a few years ago to a toy company that could trample Mattel under its feet. It had become a giant in the toy industry. This could no longer be described as ability, but magic. If she had not seen it with her own eyes, it would have been hard to imagine that this little munchkin was hiding such a terrifying demonic power. How'd he do it? It was truly unimaginable. There was too much mysterious potential in this child, which made him want to explore it. Chapter 1166. When he was 12 years old, he debuted and took over the North American market from his father. However, it took him 3 years to gain his father's approval. This child, however, actually managed to turn Laji, which was initially in decline, into the leading toy supplier in one fell swoop. Not simple. Gong Jie was still sizing up the high-tech decor in the room with great interest. Yu, who was sitting opposite him, narrowed his eyes and could not help sizing up the young man sitting in front of him. Similar. Too similar. Gong Jie's facial features were too similar to his mother's. He was even a little suspicious of the man's background. It was said that his mother had a long-lost younger brother when she was young. Could it be? Yu was quickly stunned by his own thoughts. How could it be? Gong Jie was the crown prince of Hurricane Group. How could he be related to his mother? It was probably just a coincidence. Still, could there be such a miraculous coincidence in this world? If it was really a coincidence, then he could not help but marvel at the uncanny workmanship of the creator. Yu lowered his eyes and sipped his tea. Regaining his senses, Gong Jie turned to look at him with a smile. After exchanging a few pleasantries, he went straight to the point. As a necessary part of the agreement, there are a few documents that I hope you can look through and sign. He lightly clapped his hands. His accompanying assistant walked to his side and handed him a document. Gong Jie passed the document to Yun Tianyu. Yu picked up the document and scanned it. He could not help but marvel at Hurricane Group's extravagance. Not only was this document made of genuine cowhide, but it was also wound with gold thread. How corrupt! Yu broke out in a cold sweat. He took out the document and signed his name without looking at it. His handwriting was extremely beautiful. Gong Jie was dumbfounded. He quietly asked, "Why don't you look at the contents of the document? Aren't you afraid that this is a slave contract?" Could it be that it's not a slave contract? Yu raised his eyebrows. "Since I've chosen to join Hurricane, I've already thought it through. As for this, it's just a necessary procedure. Is there a need to look at it?" Gong Jie was startled for a moment before he smiled. "You are indeed worthy of being valued by my father." Yu's wisdom and maturity were an eye-opener for him. After putting away the signed documents, Gong Jie slowly said, "From now on, you are officially a member of the Hurricane Group. In addition to fulfilling the conditions promised to you, my father also specially assigned someone to you." "Who?" Gong Jie snapped his fingers. The door opened. Yun Tianyu looked over and saw an 8 or 9-year-old Loli slowly walking in. His heart skipped a beat. While he was in a daze, the little Loli had already walked in front of him. She stopped in her tracks and stood in front of him, looking down at him with a cold expression. Yu couldn't help but look up at her. At a glance, he saw the girl's chiseled chin. Judging from her immature facial features, this girl was only 8 or 9 years old. However, what was different from ordinary Eastern girls was that the girl's eyebrows were very deep. She had both the noble coldness of European descent and the mysterious gentleness of Eastern descent. She presented an exceptionally beautiful beauty. She seemed to be a mixed blood. She had short brown hair that reached her ears and delicate eyebrows.